yeah, let's just start then with a blank canvas. And at this point, we're looking at all the design elements.
Yeah.
So we'll go through them one by one. I think in the short to medium term, we could look at regrouping them or somehow redistributing them.
I certainly
Obviously,
think that's a really good idea in the sense that, you know, that there are groups, aren't there, for this, definitely, because you've got all of the kind of key field types, haven't you?
Exactly right.
Oh, and why don't we do those? Why don't we do the field types first, actually, rather than going through them in any other way? Go on, Andy.
Yeah, I think that there may even somewhere be an option to show these grouped already.
Oh, really?
But at the it may just be that it's not exposed in the settings. It's kind of perhaps behind the scenes, because this was always built to be a completely extendable or changeable list or whatever.
Because this is really good news, because I think if you could actually show the field types as the first set, and then the presentation ones in the second set, and then the advanced ones in a third set, then we almost don't need to remove the advanced ones, do we? Because actually, you're just going to say you kind of concentrate on the first set.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good thinking.
That's a better way, because I guess that's a better way, because it's less fussy. It gives people all of the functionality if they really wanted it. But at the same time, it also shows the broad set of features that we've got. And I think the other thing that I like about it is that one of the challenges we've got is resetting the imagery on that, because obviously you and I haven't really got bigger versions of those images.
No, that's right.
So but that solve it as well.
Yeah, that's right. So starting then with the display, we have a static display. Right? You have the label, the picture, info, etc. I guess those are the...
Well, way too quick. So let's just go through with label. Let's start with label.
Sure. Well, just quickly to group them. So I'm not going to go through...
Okay, sorry, yeah. Okay.
No, you're absolutely right to call me out, and indeed continue to do so. So we'd have the static display. Then we would have the kind of select... I guess maybe even before static display, we have kind of the groupings. We have the panel.
Yeah.
And I guess we have the repeater panel. Exactly right. So in fact, maybe it's like sections, panels, and repeater panels are kind of basically things that can contain other things.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Actually, as you say, sections, panels, and repeater panels makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah.
Sort of containers, I guess. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Containers. Spot on. So we've got the containers. Then we've got the terms that display. These can, of course, be populated from a data source. The text or an image or whatever could be updated. However, they don't feature any method to interact with that. It is just static.
Yeah.
And deliberately so. Obviously, very useful. Yeah. Then we get on to, it's kind of, as you say, then, I think we then get on to basically the rest, in air quotes, but just with a subdivision of basic the rest and advanced the rest, because the rest just means stuff you can interact with.
I think one of the areas for me is the field types. So, again, within that, you've got a small text field, large text field, an image, a drop down box, a drop down, because I think those are the things that, for example, me and Kieran are always talking about, aren't they? And I think they are probably, obviously for a database, those are the basic areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I guess the buttons are a different area because there's a real functionality.
I think buttons are almost a separate
area. Yeah, they really are, aren't they? I fully agree. And then I sort of almost got the engines, like the mapping engine, the plugin host, obviously the HTML content, those sort of big chunky things.
I think we just have advanced elements, and then we can go through those. But yeah, as you say, I like the idea of the panels, the repeater panels, the tables, where's tables? It's in the presentation layer, isn't it?
Well, the tables, we have the two.
They're a container, aren't they? Really?
Yeah. Well, we've got the. By tables, do you mean the show data, or do you mean the grid? Because there's like
the show data, yeah. Because really, the show data can be data entry, but it also can be a presentation, though, can't it?
It's mainly presentation. So it's data selection and presentation. That's it for the foreseeable future. We also have the grid view. That's good for presentation, where you put something on the x-axis, something on the y-axis, and like, I don't know, count or an average or something. Very useful. Like
I've never used it. I've never ever used that.
It's handy. Like motor industry, you could have like make a vehicle on the across the top, and then running down the bottom you could have like, I don't know, county or sales agent or something, and the number of each vehicle and each sales agent.
I've forgotten you've done that. I've forgotten you've done that. So yeah, that's so basically, as you say, if you're presenting a table where you've got, as you say, let's say it's comparing 3 products. That would be the grid view then, really, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And say product 1, product 2, product 3, and then you have like sales or features or something. Can be good.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's a very useful one. So I think absolutely. I think we're all agreed. We have groupings of design elements.
Okay.
The simplest
Kieran,
one.
Just as we're going through, Kieran, can you just make a note of those groupings and make sure all the building blocks that we've got are in them?
Yeah. I've got at the moment. The groups are containers, static display elements, field types and kind of data entry, buttons, and then advanced.
I think that's about right. Andy, you good with that?
Yep, I think so. Yeah, well done for getting this all done speedily.
Yeah, nice. I think that really helps us, though. And I think if that was presented on the left-hand side in that way, your eye doesn't have to go running around. If you're doing a field thing, you're just going to go to the fields, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And the one I can never find is the drop down, which is there.
Yeah, as you say, bizarre. What's the one next to it?
The attractive drop down.
Yeah, which we haven't used for a good long time. The idea was that in the remote spaces manager, you could create appearances,
right,
and make the drop downs. There was a fad about, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, for all pretty drop downs that looked funky or fun, and I think people moved away from those quite quickly because they were actually quite at times confusing to interact with, and obviously mobile phones do it a different way.
Yeah.
So it's one that we could potentially retire. I certainly don't think we've ever actually used that in a live project. It's more been just and similarly with, I think, the attractive list. We just use the show data and the checklist. But at the same time, maybe what we could do is either for the time being hide them or
tie them for now, because that's the thing. The more we have, the more
we have to explain. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it costs us money every time we do it. So we really want to be in a situation where we don't have to do stuff unnecessarily if it's
exactly. And I think that, just to quickly digress, I think the key thing here comes back to our refocusing with version 4 on the merging of the roles. So the idea behind for instance, the attractive dropdown would be that basically a no-code user could perhaps change the appearance and do fun things. But I think we now, much more the case that if it's a no-code user, well, they'll be using a template. But normally there'd be at least a low-code user or a low-code user working with them, or it would be a low-code user using it in the first place. And they would perhaps now be able to directly use the display schemes or what have you. So the schemes, So agreed. I think we can perhaps deprecate that and just kind of tuck it away.
Yeah. So when you say I think we could, are you then going to do it?
I'm just trying to think of the current schedule. We can certainly put it on the list of things to be done, and do it before long. It'll be a useful feature to have in the first place. It's just to hide things completely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can do that. But actually, now that I'm thinking about it, perhaps the best time to do it is when we do actually, if we do indeed rejig all of the all of this panel, this selection menu.
Yeah.
So we start then with the label. The label I find is the best element to use to demonstrate, because very simple. I use it if I need to demonstrate moving or linking, etc. And again, because the links to the data source are actually fairly straightforward. As you know, you're just basically getting data or storing data.
But you can. So one of the general use case is to present data with a label, isn't it, on the page?
Correct. Yes.
But equally, you can also hide a label and then put data in it to filter, can't you?
Exactly right. I would break it down into 3 use cases, and they pretty much cover almost all of the scenarios.
Yeah.
The first one is to just display, information or navigation, some kind of field name, or indeed it can, you can use it to like click through to a section or something. The second is then when you display information that can change. It can be drawn from a data source, but it can't be edited. So basically read-only information. And then the third one, as you say, is when you use a label with its hidden, so it's made invisible, and then they are extremely useful for building up the logic that goes into the processing behind the scenes of the canvas.
I missed the difference between display and read only. I thought that what's the difference?
The first one is just literally static. It says, hello, this page does this, or you have it next to a field and says, please put in your username here. Great. So that really is just like entering the text. But then the other would be that, in fact, let me quickly
I see what you're saying. So you can actually present data from a field into
exactly
as dead data, as opposed to just typing it in.
Exactly. So this one here, for instance, this is your, username. For instance. So this one here is just that static. That's never going to change. I've just used it, as a block of text. Then this one is also a label. However, this might be getting the data, for instance. So it's a bit more. It's not interactive with the user, but the canvas kind of works more with it. And then, as you say that, the third one, which is where we've made it invisible, and we might be might indeed be having, might put sort of like, for instance, the name. Let's call this label current user ID or something. It might be. Might mess around with that.
Perfect. I tell you what, just before we jump onto anything else, I guess the other thing is about the labels is sorry, if you go back to the properties, Andrew, on the label.
Yes, of course.
What I was going to mention, you can use them as a link, which is quite useful, isn't it? So instead of having a button as people would use it traditionally in a web design perspective, you can use it to link to pretty much anything, which is great. But also you've got the ability to limit the text length, haven't you, on the options? So you can actually, if you want to prevent overflow of text, that's one way to do it. You've got the allow HTML as well. So you could then code HTML straight into the label. Is that right?
That's correct. And this is the classic case of it's turned off unless a power user needs to do something really smart.
But then you can potentially present HTML content components within the space you've allocated in the on the page with the label. Is that right?
Exactly right. And one very obvious use case is, so if I were to turn that on, then if this data was getting its data from, for instance, this new column, what I might, for instance, do, so right, I'm now a power user. So I'm going to add a bit of processing, and this is a version 4 thing. So it's getting its data from a new column. Then what I'm going to do is the first thing, this is key, I'm going to make it safe. So it's going to if there are any HTML things, etc., making those safe so we won't be subject to to vulnerabilities. But then I could, for instance, add a prefix, and this could be like anchor style equals something class, basically whatever custom stuff I want to do, and then add a suffix, which would be, for instance, to then close the anchor, for just as a random example. So that means that so if this option was then turned off, sorry, not that option, this option, it would then still display this as text, and that's where we are focusing on safety. Is even though I'm saying make safe, etc., I still have to proactively say yes. I'm expecting HTML to be coming from the data source. So it's useful like that. Then I think there's a small extent to which this has been partially superseded by the more powerful HTML content, but that actually is almost in itself the definition of why this feature is still there. Is the HTML content maybe more powerful, but it's also more complex. You have to understand more to work with the HTML content. So it enables you to do more, but actually sometimes you don't need to do more. You just need a fairly simple thing, and you can do that with the label.
Yeah, so it could be something as trivial as defining a color or a font style or something like that, couldn't it? I mean, it could be
exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. And as we continue to develop version 4, the use cases for it are actually shrinking, because we can just do more and more and more, and with abilities like our one to manage the styles, you would probably now do it using that in a schema. And yet at the same time, obviously, there's no point in taking it out, so we have left it in there. But indeed, that's a very good point.
Yeah. Okay. So we've actually got another use case, which is actually you could potentially use it as an active button, and actually the fifth use case is you could use it to embed HTML, simple HTML into your page.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is the thing with Kieran. This is the thing, speaking to Andrew about a thing like a label. You realise all of a sudden you've got 5 use cases that you can use it for.
But it happens. So you're in? Or you done?
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it happens even to me. I'll be going through something with someone else, and I'll be like, wait, what did you just use that for? Whoa! And it's great. Things get repurposed in weird and wonderful ways.
Yeah. Okay, Kieran. Any questions about labels?
No, not really. I would ask I know that you just used it for some simple HTML. Is that something that I'd be able to do if I, for instance, ever need to in the future? Or is that something that's because of your level of access to sort of the canvases and stuff? Because I know that you've got a different, like an admin account of the Encanvas system, and I've got the equivalent of the sort of data analyst sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Is that something that would be worth me being able to do? Is that something I can, if I need to look into that? Or
I mean, to be honest, I've actually used this myself, Kieran, and the HTML controls, where I've actually got some embedded HTML from a third party for a simple thing like a countdown clock or something like that. And I can't be bothered to try and code it all, or I don't know how to code it all. But there's obviously some standard code you can just paste in from a third party. Now, obviously, there are security implications of that, which is why we're always saying it needs to have oversight with IT, because IT needs to be able to see what's been done. But Andrew, I think I'm right in saying you literally can just paste HTML into there, can't you?
Absolutely. But yes, you're right, Kieran, and very good question to ask. Because actually there are several, and now that I think about it, sort of there are multiple answers to the different parts of the question. So first of all, just quickly before I come back to your main point there, Kieran, is just to agree with what you're saying there in terms of the security risk potentially of the third-party code, and that's where plugins are so great, because that enables us to reuse basically vetted and carefully, passed and included code. So rather than just having to each time paste the same third-party code into the canvas, we can now go through the proper vetting process, publish it as a plugin, and then just call that. So that's hugely useful. Then to come back to what you're saying, Kieran, yes, absolutely. So in the version that you've got, the there will be the same, in fact, funny enough, the same allow HTML thing will be there. And what we have, again, same thing. It's at this stage, it's just behind the scenes because I haven't put the setting in here, is actually the ability to specify your role as a user. And do you want to be no code, low code, or high code? And I actually put those in.
Oh, I like that, Andrew. That's awesome. Yeah.
And what it'll do is it'll show and hide things like these extended web option styles. It'll show and hide the the CSS tab and what have you. And exactly, so so the idea there is that it's always there if you want it, but then for different roles we can by default hide it or show it. Then the other thing is sorry, let me start again. The other area of sort of a level customization is in this this portion here, where we're looking at the site structure, and actually hopefully with the both of the sites we've got up at the moment that we're both working on, hopefully there should be both options for you there, and do let me know if not. Both the analyst one and then also the architect one, and that's more just about the structures though, rather than any specific setting in terms of HTML, etc. Yep, very good.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Andrew, if you would, let's go on to a new section and let's now talk about the basic fields, the text fields, shall we? Because they're obviously the easiest ones to cover off next.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say then the variations like password box and number box, where you can like restrict this. Yes, these are all quite closely related.
Okay.
So as you say, these are then these can fulfill many of the same things as the label. I think they don't have the ability to specify a click action, obviously. Although there's a cool thing with the text box where you can make it look like a label, and then when it clicks, it'll turn it into an editable field, which is nice. And of course, very nice on a repeater panel. So instead of having just like 50 boxes, each one looks like a label, and then you click it and it turns into.
That is a great feature. Box. I use that all the time.
Neat. Yeah, good stuff. Glad to hear it. So with the exception of sort of navigation, these are then like our second label function, but with the ability for the user to then edit and make changes to the contents. Now, technically, it's possible to, for instance, in the actions layer, could create a conditional statement, and we could include an action to, for instance, to disable that. However, those are more or less just user interface niceties. It's not to be trusted from a security standpoint, because someone with a hacked or customized browser can easily just switch off JavaScript, for instance, and get around that. So if data is truly intended to be read-only, we use the label. Otherwise, we use the text box as we can do various things with hiding and with sort of enabling, disabling, showing, hiding, etc. Having said that, the exception to that is the numeric box, which does have basically a hard read-only switch. The idea being here that the numeric box, for instance, we might be using formulas. So there may be reasons why we're using the numeric box effectively in a label mode, whereas the text box, you just use a label if you want a label version of a text box.
Yes. Yeah, I understand. Now, in terms of when you're putting these fields on a page, the order of data entry, Andrew, how is that now set up?
By order of data entry, do you mean sort of the tab ordering?
Well, I guess so. Yeah, the tab ordering. Tab ordering.
So that should be automatically processed. So so when we put the elements on here, they can go in a different order. I can put this one in and then add a new thing and a new thing, and it can all be higgledy-piggledy. Yeah. But when we load the canvas to the and it's behind the screen share controls. When we load the canvas here, it should then do basically a reordering so that everything goes top to bottom in the tab ordering, because there are very few to almost zero use cases where you'd want any kind of weird tab ordering where you go bottom right then top. It's basically people will just every single time I've ever come across a use case, it's you're tabbing top to bottom. Now, having said that, I did notice something recently where I was doing a version 4 canvas and I was expecting it to to behave, and it didn't. So I don't know if there's maybe something I just need to double check with version 4, but there is always the option in the properties of a canvas to manually impose that same the same top to bottom order, or indeed to reverse it. And I think actually you can also do that at the section level by setting the default child tab ordering.
Okay.
So and what that does is that then manually puts them in. So for instance, if we look now at, if we were to look at the actually this is alphabetized, this analysis view. If this analysis view wasn't alphabetized, these might be in a strange order, because of how I've added it. And as I say, then publishing it will automatically order them, but obviously isn't going to change the original canvas. But then if I was to set the default tab, even here now, they would appear in the top.
Okay. So Andrew, in terms of the application of the text box and the text area, I guess the difference is just simply the volume of the text.
Yes, and it's a multi-line, as you say.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. Okay. Now, with the password box, the difference between that is?
Two things. First of all, actually three things. One is technical, another one is semi-technical, and the other, So the first one, the easiest one to go through, is actually just that when the user types into it, they don't see what they've typed, they just see the kind of hidden blob or whatever it is that the browser displays. So it is actually specifically coded for the browser. Then the second one is actually that so this is just fundamental kind of HTML/.NET fundamental web security concept, is that when you type into a password box, it will send the data to the server, but the server won't then send the data back ever. Right. So, it's kind of like, if you, for instance, type in your password into a login form, and then the login form says incorrect user details, please try again. You'll see your username is still there, but the password isn't still filled in. And that is just kind of fundamental belt and braces security. So the password box is basically, I guess, used for entering passwords, and the idea being that you shouldn't, you would never need to, in a sense, display or persist a password, in its hidden form. Then the third difference is that the password has very importantly baked in password hashing. And actually, and this is essential when it comes to, just fundamentally when it comes to security, is the ability to store passwords hashed. And we do it very nicely in that the passwords can also be what's called per user salted. So for every different user, we create a random key that is stored in the database, and then the password box will use that key either when they're trying to log in, or indeed if this is now on the settings canvas where they're changing their password, it'll use that per user key as part of the hashing process. So what that means is when two users have the same password, it's not stored the same in the database. So that removes that vulnerability.
But with a password box, I mean, generally, if you're using App Fabric, you've already got a login page, haven't you?
Exactly right. And it will 90% guaranteed, or 100% guaranteed, feature this on the page. And there may well be requirements for password complexity. It needs to be 10, it needs to be at least 10 long, can't be longer than 100, 512, etc. So it's basically a very specialized entry-only text box.
Okay. Now, other than using it for entry to a system, have you ever used a password box for any other reason?
That's a super question, and the answer is no. Because yeah.
So generally speaking, I am talking generally, but generally speaking, there's always the weird situation. Most users will never actually need to use the password box, will they?
Correct, and that's actually good insight.
Yeah,
that's hadn't occurred to me. That, as you say, it's once it's set up in the template by the admin. They wouldn't. Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. The only thing I can think of. So you go in.
I was going to say, therefore, a no-code user in Canvas would probably not need to see it in their
exactly list. The only thing I can think of possibly is that sometimes, well, first of all, if they are somehow customizing the user settings canvas, there'd probably be a change your password there. Obviously, it would be on the forgotten. No, actually, it wouldn't be on the forgotten passwords thing. No, what I'm thinking is occasionally sites will require users to re-enter their password to perform certain, real high-level super admin actions. And they would use it there, but there's a very, very small use case scenarios.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So onto if we're happy, Kieran, are you happy with all that?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so onto the numeric box, Andrew, and obviously most people that use a numeric box, a numeric feature, are used to a spreadsheet, aren't they? And the way that formulas work with a spreadsheet. In the case of Encanvas, we're creating the relationships between the boxes and the formula, aren't we?
That's correct. Yep, exactly right. But as you say, each the numeric box is a standalone thing. It's not part of a sheet per se, and it will have links to either other numeric elements or to data in the database that allows it to, if necessary, perform calculations. So again, we can kind of split the numeric box into two roles. Firstly is one where it's just either displaying or collecting, entered numeric data. So obviously the good thing about that is formatting, these sorts of considerations. But then the second use case is where it is indeed performing calculation, be it converting something from the database into percentage, be it adding the profit and the loss figures, the costs and revenue figures to generate an overall profit figure. These sorts of things.
So for the benefit of Kieran, I think Kieran has never really seen this. Could we do an A plus B equals C example with three?
Yeah, absolutely. But so let's do the one I was just actually mentioning. So let's say that somebody. So we'll use we'll go with a label numeric box combo, and then, like I say, normally we would not have this canvas be this wide. So let's say that. So let's say enter revenue, and that's going to be So this is going to be our revenue box as located, and then enter costs. Call this one costs just to help us keep track. Okay, and then we're going to have this is your profit kind of label, and we'll make that maybe bold and red or something like that. So what we would then do is, so we want to take this, and show the result as a calculation.
Yeah.
So we'd have another numeric box. Now, this particular one we're just doing now is entering it, but similarly, this wouldn't have to come from user input. It could just be coming from a database. So what we would do is, so this numeric box, for instance, I would then probably make read only. So it's now, it's displaying basically formula results. And in order to, so the formula obviously is going, so I think this is obvious. And normally I catch myself if I say obviously too quickly, but this is obvious. We're just going to have revenue minus cost as our formula.
Yeah.
Then in order to then say where does each of these come from, we do that using linking. So formula reference to the first box, I held down control to bring up the options, and we're going to get our revenue from the box. Now, the fact that I may be called the numeric box revenue and I've typed revenue here, doesn't matter. We could call this XYZ, doesn't matter. But of course, now in the formula, that has to be XYZ.
Okay, so it does actually matter what you call it at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So this is the thing. So XYZ is going to be evaluated. So the numeric box will run through this formula, break it down into terms. It's pretty good. You can use brackets and you know, sort of pretty you know, and numeric constants and things. But what it'll do is it'll find, right, I have a term XYZ. Let me now go through my links, because you can also, as mentioned, get so reference and formula. We could, let's, you know, for instance, say we're getting our costs from this column. Now, something that's important here to mention is, of course,
I didn't understand that. Sorry, Andrew. I didn't understand what that meant.
Okay, so so with the formula, we could put, as say, you know, for instance, revenue plus 2, you know, minus cost times 100. Let's say cost is in, I don't know, cents or dollars or something like that. So this formula is, you know, basic math. It includes brackets, sort of precedent, etc., and the sort of standard operators, plus, minus, times, etc. Then so what the numeric box will do when it comes time to send a value to the web browser, it will pass this formula, it'll recognize, you know, the times, minus, brackets, the 2, the 100, but it will say, revenue is a term I've got to find, cost is a term I've got to find, and then it'll go through its links to find where we've said, here's the revenue variable, you know, from this numeric box. But then similarly, we could, if we wanted to, get, for instance, let's say the costs come from the database.
Yeah, okay. Presumably you'd have to filter the record if you did that, otherwise it would
exactly. Two options: either filter the record, or there are different ways of treating multiple values. So you can either average them out, do the sum. Quite often I use numeric box with the number of rows. They're very useful, or the highest value or the lowest value. Excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah. But as you say, probably I would say the most common I use is multiple rows. No, don't do anything. That's an error condition. And instead the numeric box would filter on, as you say, something that's kind of selecting one row from the table. Exactly right.
Yeah. So if you hadn't have selected that and you said the costs come from here, what would it do? Just receive all of those values? No, so it would if it would by default leave it blank, because it doesn't actually know how to deal with multiple values. We can, I believe, let me just hopefully not prove myself horribly wrong. Let's find out. Yeah, there we go. I think numeric boxes do work fine in repeater panels. So if the repeater panel has numeric box with a reference and this is blank, that should be fine, because actually the repeater panel will just create, let's say, 30 numeric boxes if there are 30 rows, and each one is only passed a value. Yes. So for instance, if a numeric, actually that is correct, I believe. But when they're standalone on the page, so as you say, there's one box for however many values it gets from the data source, it will indeed either need this set or it'll leave it blank. Yeah. So is it possible? I've always wondered this. Is it possible to create a calculator on Encanvas using the numeric control? The answer to that is not a good one. I mean, yes, but I don't think you would want to. So first of all, with plugins, you can now do basically anything. Yeah. Which is obviously wonderful, and with a bit of expertise, you can, sort of a high code user can do anything really well, in addition to just being able to fundamentally do anything. Yeah. But what we could, for instance, do, it would be quite possible to stick in a numeric box. So sticking a numeric box, you say, right, operator A, have another one operator B. Then from probably a drop down, you would say, right, what do you want to do? Add the two together, subtract, etc., and then have a different range of numeric boxes. So I say it's not going to be the best or most user-friendly calculation in the world. However, it would allow you to choose operators and perform arithmetic. Got it. Yeah. That makes sense. Kieran, I'm sorry. First of all, Andrew, anything else about the numeric field?
So like I said, the first of the use cases was about formatting. So for instance, being able to to add like a pound sign, if, for instance, if you want it to be in currency, you have it before or after, always showed. And now these are useful things that often do make a difference in terms of user experience, and they can be tricky to do with labels. When I say tricky to do with labels, you could now always do it with our new processing here. So I could just add prefix, and the prefix, of course, is just going to be pound. Great, done. That didn't used to be the case, but of course the nice thing about the numeric box is that it will, as I say, we can add prefix, but we can also then maybe restrict it to 2 decimal places, which is so nice. Then having your your figures, even if it's 10.00, it'll still actually show those 2 decimal places, which is very good. So you can, and as you've got those options there. Apart from that, setting a default is useful quite often. Often we'll default to 0 because it can kind of change the dynamic of the calculation. If you don't have a default, then everything has to be entered and you'll get a calculation result. If you do put in default, then you can kind of build up the calculation as you go along, and things become optional. Then it is nice in that in this example up here, what it would be doing is it would actually automatically generate the JavaScript so that as the user is typing in their revenue, it is automatically updating the numeric box live effectively, which is nice, and at times non-trivial. So the numeric box is useful, and definitely has its place when sort of dealing with figures.
Fantastic. Kieran, anything else that you can think of?
Not really. It makes a lot of sense to me, to be honest. It looks really good.
Did you know it did that, mate, by the way? I don't know if you...
Sorry?
I don't know if you knew it did all those things.
I've never used it, to be honest. But it's really good. Yeah, it looks really, really useful. I'm definitely thinking about things I could do with it. Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, at one time I was building an accounting system, a complete accounting system with Encanvas, and actually there were technically there were no obstacles I came across that a numeric box could not actually do in an accounting system, which just goes to show how remarkable it is. Even the cumulative things, Andrew, that sort of stuff, it seems to be able to cope with, doesn't it? Just through the fields, the options, the selections, and what have you.
Exactly, and I agree with what you both say, and exactly as you say about Kieran as well. That with the one project we're currently working on, the value chain one, that when you get to reporting, so it's the stage we'll be getting to soon. Suddenly the numeric box is going to be everywhere. Even things as simple as like showing how many events have happened in the last month, or how many users were on a particular walkabout or something like that. It's going to be a numeric box, and it's going to probably be because the get data as well for the numeric box, as well as the reference formula, has this same aggregation mode. So, and quite often, count the number of rows, so useful. Just like how many times.
That's really useful, yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, often I'll put it above a show data. So show data will be showing the 258 rows, and just above top you can have a numeric box with get the number of rows, and you can put like suffixes like rows or entons or items or whatever it is that you're looking at, widgets. So it'll say 32 widgets or something like that. It's nice. And of course, I like this. And what you can do is you can also then have widgets. So if you're really being smart, you can say one widget, 2 widgets.
Yeah, I like that. I didn't know it did that. That is fantastic. And Andrew, in terms of the virtual fields, in terms of the data inputs, you've got some more kind of nuanced controls with what gets received through virtual columns, haven't you?
Yes, exactly. And this is where we start to traverse between the no code to the low code user.
Yeah.
So virtual columns, you're right. We've all the way along said that SQL is very, whatever data source is being used, in our case, it's often SQL, is a very powerful language. and by using SQL statements, you can do basic, again, arbitrarily complex calculations, which is great. But then as you say, even but also the virtual columns, like the one of my so add new insert after so virtually a formatted value, as you say, is a virtual column where we can use this. And you're quite right, being able to aggregate count. So you're absolutely right. That is exactly another way of doing it. And actually, the nice thing there is that that's done in the database. So there is. So let's say, for instance, let me just quickly do another section. Let's add in a numeric box and say, so there are X things you need to worry about, something like that. And if you, just to quickly say, if you leave this blank, it will then presume that it uses this for everything. So it's optional to then put it. Then if we have here's our table, things to worry about. And so then what I might do, and you can actually generate it directly. So by right clicking on the table, I can generate data structures, formatted value count. So this is now aggregation of the table. And what this now means is that this numeric box will just be sent a single value, maybe it's 1,000. So the database is very good at knowing that there are 1,000 rows in this table, and it just sends 1,000. Instead of, for instance, if I exactly say, and if we didn't do that, if we had our worry ID and I had a numeric box, and the numeric box was getting the data, just a straight up link, and it was merely counting the number of rows, then I say what that is going to do is that's going to return 1,000 worry IDs, and it's me going to say, there are 1,000. So obviously it'll give you exactly the same result, but just technically, this one is much more efficient in this case. However, having said that, it may well be that I think in 99% of the sort of Encanvas use cases, we're not talking about this kind of scale where that's actually going to be a problem. We're only talking the ones where you're in the hundreds of thousands of rows. Of course, where this one is useful is, let's say I've got a show data, and I am showing all of my this is the ID, and then we've got our worry name. So we're getting that. So we're getting this information anyway for our show data. Then all we need to do is, if the numeric box, we just tell it to run on the same query. This now means we only have the one query. So the show data basically takes precedence, gets the 1,000 rows, displays them, and this box says, while you're there, I just need to check how many rows you've got. Whereas if we were using the show data and this one, that would be two queries, because the show data would get its data, and then the numeric box would say, okay, separate query, how many rows? So it's just kind of really just sort of subtlety and optimization here we're looking into.
But that actually shows the difference between a no-code user that doesn't really understand all that, and an IT guy that is appreciating the nuance difference and the impact it could have if you've got 200 users on the system.
Exactly.
Interesting. Kieran, did that make sense to you? Andrew went through that quite quick.
I followed that. It was really interesting, actually. A lot of difference between that.
Now, Andrew, on a numeric box, you can add a prefix, like obviously a pound sign, but you can also use it kind of like a label, can't you, onto the box?
Exactly. Pound sign is just text in this case. So
Now, generally, with a text box or a text field, we normally would add a separate label field, label to the field, wouldn't we? Or do you tend not to do that? Is there a prefix option on a text field?
Nowadays, so here I would tend to use this when it's in the read-only thing, because it looks weird if it looks like a text box. So it's where you're displaying it. Now, the good thing about this is the formatting. So for instance, let's say we're I don't know, it's something that can be averaged. You can of course restrict it to 2 decimal places if we're talking fractional things you need to worry about. So the label, you can now do the same thing two ways with the label.
Yeah.
The first one is, like we've said, is you could get the data, and in the label you could you could add your prefix, add your suffix, whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Then the other thing then is that a label, you can get data, that's fine, but you can also you can use a different kind of link, which is called use text.
Yeah.
Now they're both pulling the data, but the difference is get data just sets the value of the text box. I don't know many other options. No, it's pretty simple. Use text, you may have both seen it. It gives you options for how you want to use it. You can, for instance, set replace all. That's where it's basically then overwriting the entire value. But then we still do indeed have just the hard coded options for things to worry about or whatever.
Yeah.
And then what do you do if there's if it's value, etc. You can even do text replacements. So let's say you want to replace underscore with excellent, whatever is extensive. Yeah. So basically, this is like a souped up, more powerful version.
Yeah.
That, because for instance, what we could also do as well is we could have here are your blah whatever. Blah things. So instead of just setting the entire thing, the entire value, we would just for instance replace percentage blah, and the percentage is just my habit. It doesn't have to have to be there. It could be blah.
Cool.
And the idea there is that many times a label doesn't need all of this extra functionality, and of course if we were using that every time, it's just unnecessary processing, because we'd be checking, is there a prefix specified? No. Are there text replacements specified? No. What do we do? Oh, we replace everything. All of this extra processing, when in fact for a lot of them, we just want to get data. So that's kind of why we have the two, is that it's not always necessary to have these more powerful options, but they are nice to be there sometimes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Kieran, you good with that?
Yeah, it's really good actually. I did think of one separate query about the sort of prefix and suffix thing. Probably a bit technical, it probably doesn't do it. I was wondering if you've got, for instance, currency you're trying to input or something, so there'll be different prefixes for the different sort of symbols they use.
Yep.
Would you be able to sort of make a variable prefix or suffix, or is it fixed and you'd have to make a different numeric box?
Yep, absolutely. Great question. And you can totally do it. So let's say, for instance, there are, because all links can be made conditional. So here, conditions for this link to apply. So let's say, for instance, we have a drop down. See how there you can't find it. And this drop down could come from a database, the data, or we could manually specify it. I'm just going to do it just because sorry, pound. Oh no, sorry, pound. There we go. And then we could just it's just, I don't know, dollar or something.
Yeah.
And so obviously, so they are they're selecting. Then what we could do is here we could say this one, for instance, with the pound sign. Compare values is probably the way to do it. And this would just be if this drop down is equal to pound, and then we could just copy that link, paste that link. Sorry, let me do that. Copy the link. I think you have to actually go here to paste. And then this one we could make dollars, and change this to if this is then equal to dollar. So that's a useful way where we can just customize anything that's linking can be customized based upon other design values. However, there is another way, probably mainly from the label at the moment, which is that in version 4 we can just do really custom stuff. So we really can. So for instance, custom code, like if I'm getting fully high code thing, I could have my, for instance, I could I could say, for instance, if there is a string which is going to be our currency, and let's just say an integer which is going to be our value, and then in here, if currency equals pound, or whatever. Oh, actually, it would probably be pounds. Then blah 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 blah. And then, so actually, let me just quickly. I'm not going to bother with that. But I'm just this. Then let's just compile it. Oh no, it didn't like my code. Can't even code. Where
amateur.
Yeah, I know. Shocking. There we go. So as you can see, so this now has compiled this code. It says, right, we have two parameters, currency and value. And it's going to say, right, where do we get this? So currency, for instance, you can specify any of the value sources that it's allowed. So for instance, here we could say, if we wanted to exactly mimic what we did before, we could say, get the parameter that we want to come from our dropdown. But then, of course, the nice thing here is that, as you can see, it basically just gives you so much more flexibility, because we can, just continue to do our infinite processing as however we want to. We can add conditions, straight in here with the logic operator, where you can, you can do any kind of combination of logic and things. So it's what we did before +1, and of course you wouldn't have to use custom code at all. I just used that. I just wanted to kind of show you that. What I could, for instance, do is I could just we just add in logic. Say, for instance, if the let's say if the active value is equal to a pound or something, or dollar or pound or so, then for something like, I don't know, then add prefix pound. These, I'm probably confusing our thing, but so you can also do it effectively in a low code mode, or no code, in fact, etc. Else, else add else, etc. So these are just all the different ways we can do it. So great question, and the answer is indeed sort of multiple different ways. And again, same thing with kind of sliding scale of from no code to high code, in terms of then the different and also the more power and complexity available or possible as you go up the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, just to bring it back down to layman's terms for me, typically, if you're transacting for a particular country, you're going to denote the country in a table somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
And so really the conditional logic is probably, if you see Germany in this, then do Deutschmarks, or now obviously euros.
100%. Exactly.
So that very often it's really the interplay between the fields and the tables, isn't it, that actually gives you that flexibility.
Exactly.
What you're choosing.
Exactly. And the main thing here being that just according to whatever there is, we can then change the way the canvas is working. Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, listen, guys, we've gone to just over an hour. This is pretty intense. It's quite
you're doing well to keep up, both of you.
So I think, it's all being recorded as well, which is hugely important, I think, because what you're describing, Andrew, is how the damn thing works, so it's quite important for everybody to understand. Can I suggest we'll take a 5 minutes, get a refresh of teas, toilets, and coffees or whatever, and then let's come back and reconvene. Is that all right?
Yep, sounds good.
All right, so I'll meet you back here in just a couple of minutes, and we can just have a reconvene. And in the meantime, I'm just going to get some response. I've got people spinning emails and things at me. I've just got to respond to a couple.
Absolutely.
So if we just take 5 minutes, I'll stay on the line.
I was going to say we'll just mute and
just mute and come back in 5.
Super. Yep. Chat.
Thanks, guys. I can imagine I get told off. Right. Is everybody refreshed?
Yeah, all set.
Good, good. Let's get back. Andrew, can we move on to check boxes and radio buttons?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll start a new section for those.
Now,
yeah.
I have to say, I think I've struggled in the past with radio buttons. Maybe they'd work slightly differently.
Yep, absolutely. Both are designed to, checkbox and radio button are designed to collect simple yes or no answers. The difference being you can have as many or as few checkboxes checked as you like in a list. However, radio buttons, if you put them all into a particular group, you can then only select one of them.
Right. Yeah.
So, for instance, let's say we have two countries. So you have your country group. So the value might be so the text might be UK, and the value checked is UK, and then we might have for instance, this one would be for instance Germany. You mentioned Germany before. Right, so Germany. And sorry, that's the group name. No, group name needs to still be country.
Yeah.
Text is Germany, value change is Germany. So you can now select one of these two, and you can always have, you know, for instance, UK is the default, etc. Germany.
Hang on,
I've seen it. It only updates the UI when you resize it. I'll have to just change that to the radio button. That's just a Windows control thing. I just have to sort that out. So so UK, Germany. But then and this would then obviously say country. But then if we wanted to, we could have another one, which would be it could be so if you've got your country, like sales group or whatever, and you can have a completely now separate thing of radio buttons. So the idea being that indeed only one can be selected at a time, unlike a text box where we could have have multiple sales groups, for instance, maybe, or none of them, etc. And so the selection in the radio button toggles between all the radio buttons in the same group name.
Okay. That's it, I think, on these two, isn't it?
Pretty much. Pretty much. Very, 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 very rarely have I ever had to use the value if not checked. It's normally like basically value if checked and just nothing if it's not checked. I mean, technically one might sometimes find that useful. For instance, if in an opt-out situation, if it's check this box to receive our marketing emails, you might well want to store an opt-out value if it's unchecked. For instance, having said that, you could still also just have a Y for checked and a null that blank is the opt-out. It's just it's there if it's needed. Apart from that, I don't think there's much necessarily to go through there. They're fairly straightforward. I think
that's straightforward. Kieran, you good with that?
Yeah, it looks good to me. Makes a lot of sense.
So shall we go on to, are there any other data input fields of any description, Andrew, that we've not covered?
Just running through them there. The drop down, I guess.
Yeah, okay, we ought to cover drop down and just make sure that we've discussed all the things with Kieran of a drop down. So obviously one of the big things is the population modes. There are two, obviously, from that, aren't there?
Yeah.
No selection text.
That's if you allow it to have no selection, that would be like, choose a country, ... or something like that. So it'll appear light grey. You can drop it down and then choose your country.
Yeah, got it. And is there a default population option? If you wanted to
so you go.
Yeah, so I'm just asking if a default population would be, say, automatically assume it's answer number 3 if it's
absolutely. So when the data is coming, in this case from the data source, we can't necessarily be certain what the data is, etc. So if you take off allow no selection, it will just automatically select the first one.
Okay.
However, if it is manual and we've got some values, then you can check one to say that it's the initial default, and that could be the third one or the fourth one.
Okay, understood. Any other aspects of drop downs, Andy?
So I use drop downs a lot. It's kind of at least half of any given canvas is made up of either show data or drop downs, and the rest is labels, I find, or panels, or buttons. Now that I mention it. So it has the same thing with as the text box, where you can make it a label potentially underlined until it's clicked, and then it becomes a drop down, which again is nice for repeater panels. I think that the fundamental concept behind drop down is that separation between the value and the text that is displayed to the user. So it's that thing where you're getting the values and then the text potentially separately. You don't have to. Let's say we have a table with indeed pound, dollar just in there as text, and that's all we care about. You technically only need the values link. You don't that would do. It would display the value, but then also that's the value that's selected. But then if we wanted to, actually it would probably be the the ID would be the value. But then if we want to customize it with a different text that's displayed to the user, we'd use that. So it's basically the interface between the values the computer or the database understands and the values humans understand in terms of that. So then what that leads to is when we are either getting or storing data, you have two different options. Either you are fundamentally getting or getting, okay, let's start with get, because actually, you're getting the content through which a user can, sort of not cycle, select, or you're getting the actual selected entry. And most often it's absolutely straight up a combination of the two. So you would have, I'm sure you both know this, I'm just going to go through it just for the sake of completeness. So let's say we have our countries table. We have country ID is just is the numeric value, and then country name is the human readable thing. So we would have, from our drop down, the values would be the ID, the names would be the text, and most often I would actually also include a sort by, so that it sorts it. Now, of course, it's not always the case, which is why it doesn't do that by default. However, it is there, and you can also do a reverse sort order if you want to ever do that.
Yeah.
Then what I would have, so then let's say we have our table with our, as you're saying, our users, and our users somewhere in all of they have their active country ID or something like that. Yeah. So when somewhere else we have a show data, again, let me just stick it into say completeness show data, where we are going through our list of users, then probably the drop down would be filtering. So it would be filtering the selection. Yeah. This would talk about here, and it would be getting the selected entry from there. So as you can see, we're bridging across the tables. So we have the one table or data source that is containing our our base data set. Yeah. And then we have another one that is actually how we're then interacting, selecting, storing, etc. That data. Then we can indeed, it is possible to have filter items. So for instance, let's say instead of country, this one up here was continent. Oh, sorry, I changed the continent. Yeah, then maybe according to these, we might actually be filtering the items. Yes. So in the countries, we may then also have a column that was some continent ID, whatever, and you could then apply the filter. Yeah, yeah. So that is a paradigm that we do sometimes. So I think this is just sort of fundamentally my approach to drop downs is I consider these as two separate things. You have your base data set, and that can be filtered and it can be populated, etc. And then you have your selection that is then made from that data set, and that can be filtered, and that can be stored, and that can be retrieved, etc. Perfect.
Happy with that, Kieran? Are you happy with that?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And as Andrew says, I think of all of the design elements, the drop down is the one most commonly used, simply for the fact as well that it improves the quality of the data entry if you can encourage users to use a drop down. And it's almost like the whole point of a database is to be able to put data in with categories and choices and options. And of course, the way to define those options for the user is with drop-down selections. It makes it quick and it makes it easy. It means that the data that's entered is always consistent, so that you've always got that interrelationship then between the tables. Brilliant, Andrew. Listen, thanks for that. Let's shall we just go back before we go on? So I think we want to do pictures, I think, a bit more. But before we do that, is there any other, again, data entry stuff in there?
Okay, so back to data entry. Obviously, you can use the GIS element for data entry. I guess the checklist, which is
that's a good example.
That works very, very similarly to the drop down. I think in terms of filtering your items, your selection, etc. Yeah. But just that it allows more than one selection. So it's more just in terms of the way that data is presented to the user. So it's got the same population mode. Obviously, this can't be a label until it's selected because it's a big thing. But it's got the same entry value, etc. Actually, no, that's a good point. So, in fact, I'm actually I was going to say I'm surprised because in my when I was dragging from the checklist, I wasn't getting get select and get items, but it's because we're being too smart for our own good. I've selected manual population, so it's hidden those options. Brilliant. So if I go back to data source, then we'll get entry value. So just like a drop down, but multiple selections. And with the check,
sure. Hang on, just get my head around that. Just like a drop down, but multiple selections. So yeah, so with a drop down, you choose one. With a checklist, you can choose several. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, makes sense.
Exactly right. Now, as it actually happens, I tend not to use the checklist because whilst the checklist is very much a standard sort of HTML thing, I tend to use the show data nowadays because show data is just more powerful. It's got headings, you can filter it, you can sort it. There are even different options for multiple select. You can go for like you can turn it on and off, and you've got flatlist. In fact, so you can even format a show data as a checklist. And it's just better. So I do tend to use the show data almost exclusively, but the checklist is there again, partly maybe because it's maybe simpler for some people, some sort of approaches.
Yeah, I mean, I must be honest, I have used the checklist a lot because it's all that I need, and I think for a lot of applications it is all that you need.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it can actually help the user to separate selection from input if everything is input into a checklist but selected from a show data.
Yeah.
But again, it's just kind of both both the checklist and the show data have different use cases that they're useful for.
That's fine. Yeah. So as you said, we can use a GIS
that contains
data entry as well. And any others though, because that is a heavy one. We won't answer that.
Absolutely. Well, obviously HTML content can. I'm not sure we'll get to GIS today. HTML content can be used to technically, you can script your HTML to then collect data, but that really isn't one for today. That is
is that your
plugin host?
Oh, that's your plugin. That's your new plugin controller. I've not seen that.
That's right. Yeah. No, exactly.
Yeah.
So obviously, tabular data upload isn't necessarily input. That's more button, like a very specific customized button.
Yeah.
Numeric slider. Gosh, I haven't used numeric slider for so long. That was really nice. Just the being able to set a range and drag your slider around in that range. And of course, I think I've said, of course, that it's not obvious at all. Forgive me. But the numeric slider can also, because it's guaranteed to be numeric value, numeric boxes can actually reference a numeric slider for in their formula. So you could you could use it for many different reasons.
Now again, I've had problems with numeric sliders before to use them. Are we sure that they still work? I guess is the question.
It has been a long time since I last tested it. There's nothing that I'm aware of that would break them. I think most likely if there were issues with it, it would just be to do with the appearance setup of the template of the secure space. So nothing fundamental within the platform, just that, maybe for instance, it was missing the slider, the specified slider icon or something. So like if it was specified in an old template and then the icon got deleted from the, from the directory, it might not have. But as far as I'm aware, it should all be working.
So Kieran, this is typically with the numeric slider, the reason we produced it was that common use case you get where you've got a user that wants to select, what size of mortgage are you looking for? What is your average income and those sorts of things. Now, Andrew, in terms of putting the labeling on the slider, because that can be a challenge, can't it?
Yes, it can be. And actually, and the numeric box, so again, same thing, this formula reference will update in real time. So you could always have, let's just stick in a new section. You could always have a slider and then with a numeric box beneath it numeric box is just literally, just showing, straight up showing the value. And again, same thing. So that, and of course that's nice because you can restrict it to no decimal places or something like that. And and that will then automatically, instantly live update as you drag and slide it. It's updating. And the nice thing is, if we were then had a formula, another formula that either depended upon this numeric box, if we wanted the rounded value, or if we wanted the exact value, it could depend on that. That formula would also then being updated. So exactly the same, nice for like, yeah, just so many different uses if we're allowing the user to sort of enter in specific numeric things.
Yeah, okay. So what you're saying then, just to rerun that one, you can actually create a numeric box, create a set of values, and then effectively it's using that as part of the reference of the formula. So when it's actually moving along, it's actually saying, oh, for this, it present that sort of thing. Exactly
right. So let's, for instance, go back to this this one here, the revenue, cost, profit. Let's say there was let's say there was also a thing which is, you know, like let's say this is a particular project costing. So we've got, you know, sales commission percentage, for instance. Not to 100. Sure, you could have a box, or you could have a slider, you know, 0 to 100. Perfect, actually. How can be the default to what we want. And then, you know, in our formula, you would be saying, you know, revenue minus cost minus, again, you know, revenue minus, what's it? It'd be revenue, probably revenue times divided by sales commission, or divided by sales commission, divided by 100, or whatever.
Whatever the ratio would be.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, and what I might do is I might, in fact, have that as a slider, and then have a numeric box, in fact, to the right as well. Just, again, these would all be read only, but to actually just display it. And again, same thing then. So I could either use the slider, or if I wanted to, I could use the box.
Okay, so yeah, actually, you could use the box to the right to actually describe the value that, so it's presenting in the box there next to it.
Yeah, exactly. Because exactly.
Perfect. Yeah, and in terms of like the font style of that font, that numeric box on the right hand side, is that all going to be done by the if you like, the look and feel settings that you've got, or can you obviously make it a bigger font or whatever? Is it all based on their standard features? Is that?
It is. It's based upon the standard features, color, etc., and especially if it's read only. So it's you know, then appears as a label. Absolutely. At the same time, it can then be overridden by the schema. So if a schema is defined, that can override, you know, like a highlight label or something, if that's defined as a schema. All the different options.
Good.
I just saw another good thing for numeric slide is if you want like a 1 to 5 rating. So let's say you're doing a survey, you've got 10 questions. You know, 1 to 5, you can kind of, because the numeric slider can also be used to display data. So, you know, you could be showing the responses to a survey, and the person would see how, you know, all 5s, all 1s, or some sort of, you know, combination.
Okay, so you potentially could use it as a filter to show data, a repeating panel.
Oh, so you can absolutely use it as a filter. That's right. But even just straight up displaying data. So, you know, let's say we're looking at, you know, people's responses to, you know, a housing survey. You would see, you know, 4-star average, 3-star, 2-star average, 5-star, etc. You could just display them using the numeric slider. But then, no, like you say, absolutely, anything can simply filter based upon it. And in that filter, what you'd be doing is you'd be applying your filter, and in that you would be, in fact, in this filter, you might be saying is, you know, greater than 5 stars, is less than 5 stars, is not equal to 5 stars, you know, all the different options. And if we wanted different options for that, we would be back to making our links conditional. So, you know, if there was a drop down that said, show me, you know, less than, show me more than, we would be checking what the section was and applying the relevant link.
Makes sense. That all makes sense. Can we move on to pictures then, inputting images?
Sure.
Well, go on.
After you, because I was about to launch into my answer.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, Kieran, you've been using images a bit, haven't you? Pictures and imports, but obviously you'd have typically done it using the. We started with the wizard, didn't we? And then we've done amendments in. So, and I think the only thing that's ever caught me out with pictures, Andrew, is where the data is, you know, is if it's actually a URL or whether we're actually adding the image into a field.
Yes, absolutely. Good
because I think generally speaking, I assume as the default, as a user, as a no code user, it's going to default to me putting the image into the database. But
that's
the
correct.
system defaults to a URL. Is that right? Is that fair?
Well, the system almost has to default to URL because so technically there'll be a URL just because that's the way HTML works. Is an image has a location, a source, as it were, and that's URL. But the URL, I say by default, is an automatic one that's created by the system. Yeah. So what we have is two or kind of three different points of interaction for images. We have displaying them, we have uploading them, and we have a button that looks like one. So we'll come back to the image button because when we actually look at buttons, because it's just the same. But instead of having either a button or a label, you're looking at an image. Yeah. So the picture then, exactly as you say. Let's start with the picture. So pictures, it's a bit like labels actually. A picture can be static, in which case we go with embed file, and we then select an image, and that then is stored in the canvas. But then the action of publishing the canvas, technically behind the scenes, it's extracting the image and storing it in a manner that can indeed be then consumed by the end user's web browser. But that's completely invisible, to the user of the canvas. The developer of the canvas doesn't care. What more should then, and similar, but like you say, if there is a URL, let's say there's an asset that where the URL is, you can just straight up tell the picture to refer to that. More commonly perhaps is when the image is getting or storing the its contents from the data source. Now, maybe just that these are maybe the wrong way around, because this second one is actually the more common, and maybe we just need to rename it, get image content or something like that. Because that's where the image is stored in the database. And exactly say, Ian, for most users who don't necessarily have access to the file system of the server, that's what they're talking about. Yes. Is the data, the image is somehow in the database and they're getting it back out. And the way they would get the data in is by using image upload. So we'll come to that in a second. But then technically, and this is indeed much rarer, is when there is an image that has already been placed, onto the server or on a different server or something. You could maybe have the URL in the table, and you could then just directly get the URL. But that really is for pre-existing images and is not a common case. Yeah.
So I should say, I personally feel that if you just said get image and that was at the top of that list, that's what people would expect, I think. And I think get image URL would suggest then that's second on the list. Yeah. And as you say, it's just getting the URL, not the image itself.
Absolutely.
That makes sense.
Or get URL of external image or something. Sounds good. We should do that. That's good. Yeah. So because the companion to that then is getting the image into the database, and I think we've got this briefly, is the image upload is specialized. It's kind of like the text box, but for images, because as well as storing the original file contents, you can store things like the file size, the extension, or resized contents, and that's very useful for like thumbnails, because in the olden days, whilst they're much better at it now, browsers were quite bad at resizing, and it'd look bad. Yeah, it would look blocky, or even it was just, again, inefficient. So let's say we're looking for a 32 by 32 pixel avatar, or 64, whatever, and you've uploaded a 1 megabyte photo from your phone. We don't want to be sending that down to other users each time they look at your avatar. So you do the natural thing of processing it as it's uploaded. So, and we've got then this specifically customized link where you've got the different options. You can specify your pixels, etc. And it is pixel based. And then this is used from a button, just like a text box or indeed a file upload element is, where you are linking from the button, which has an action to either update the data or to store the data. Yeah. And you're referring to the
I've never used that, but I should have used that in the past, I guess, because I'm uploading a big file and I'm putting a big file back, whereas there's probably no need.
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Anything else about images, the photos and images?
No, not really. Photos can go into a repeater panel if you need them to.
Yeah, that's good. And I think, so I think we've finished all the data entry. Shall we go on to repeater panels and show data?
Yeah, absolutely. And that once we've done repeater panels and show data, that might actually be a good point to end today. Because as you say, we've gone through many things. And the other side of those lie GIS and
we won't get into those today. No, absolutely
exactly.
Not.
Yeah. So I think, and these are probably the two that you guys know because they're also pretty good. So panels are mainly just for grouping, and they are super useful for grouping, especially now we have schemas.
Yeah.
So like when there's a schema, like the schemas are defined, title panel, header panel, information panel, etc. Very, very useful.
Yes.
I like using panels because it keeps things.
Andrew, on that point, just as a slight aside, I do think we should agree some standard schemas and also the naming conventions of those standard schemas. Do you? Because then when we actually present an app fabric out of the box, you could actually have, because we've only got certain schema designs that we're working to at the moment, haven't we? And I think if we just agreed the phraseology of that, then obviously it would make it easier for somebody to just instantly use those schemas that have been designed. What do you think?
Absolutely. So at the moment, that is just going to come down to our definition of schemas in the standard template we implement for an app fabric.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's what we'll do for a while. If we really wanted to long term, we could potentially build in genuinely standard default schemas within the platform, but actually I think that's maybe unnecessary and limiting because you might come to weird situations where you don't want that. So it's just by correctly configuring the template that we will achieve that. But exactly as you say, if we just lay out the standard set, make sure they're in the template, then those can be standard enough to go into documentation effectively.
Yes, that makes sense. Yep.
Then the repeater panel is like a panel, except that it will duplicate its contents for each row of data in the table. So panel is static, and if I stick stuff in there, these are just it's as if these were out here in the section. Doesn't even make a difference.
Yeah.
However, with the repeater panel, with the repeater panel, it will then, let's say we have a text box for our Lawrie ID. It will then, if there are 1,000 Lawrie IDs, we will then see 1,000 text box. All there. Now, this is obviously useful for display. So if you want to, you can make it read only.
Yeah.
But you can also use it for selection. So you could select a row, and then other elements can filter from the repeating panel. And to do selection, it's a bit like the show data. You have your identifying column, and you then with the repeater panel, my apologies, you have to say which data group you're repeating through, and then you can have your identifying column, and then that can do the normal applying filter any way you wanted to. Then what you can also do, though, a real kind of specialized power move, as it were, is commonly we use a show data at the top of an edit page to select a row, and then we have the controls below it, and then the buttons to add updates.
Yeah.
Technically, what you could instead do is edit in place. So the repeating panel could be showing the data. Let's say it's our Lawrie name.
Yeah.
Now you can edit it in place. So that would have 1,000. You could edit 10 of them or so. And the button then, which would be our update button or add new button, would be using this text boxing. Now, just that simple action that I've done there of linking to a text box inside repeater panel does all sorts of stuff in the back end. For instance, what it will do is it will actually keep track of all of the entries, and it will only update the rows that have changed, and things like that. So it's actually
why did you build that feature? What was the situation that required that?
It makes it more like a spreadsheet. So what you can see is instead of, let's say we have 50 budgets, and instead of clicking on each user, click in the show data, enter, update, click, enter, update, click, enter, update. You just want a single view of all the users with their budgets, and you just want to select one, change it, select one, change it, select one, change it, and hit save.
Yes.
That you can do. And obviously that's a single column. You could have budget, commission, you could have many text boxes per user, or drop downs. And I think that's the thing as well, is you do get that flexibility of being a text, numeric box, drop down, etc. So it's just a way of approaching a spreadsheet like entry mechanism, is through using the repeating panel for data update.
What are the advantages of a show data panel over a repeating panel?
Things like being able to sort it and filter it automatically. So I could, of course, build sorting for repeater panel and filtering for repeater panel, but that would be using design elements. I'd have a drop down which said what sort by, and it would then, you'd have your sort by column, and be conditional, and I'd have my filtering to my different elements. With a show data, that's all automatic. And the show data nowadays has got so many different formatting options and clever things you can do. And with the show data, it's a nice tabular view that people expect. It resizes very nicely as the page resizes, text wraps, etc. But then, as I say, with the show data, if you're editing, you're basically editing one row at a time, whereas the repeating panel is for editing multiple rows. So I guess maybe the best way to summarize it would be, if you're editing a lot of things that are simple, use the repeating panel option. If on the other hand you are maybe the things are complicated, or you're only looking to edit one at a time, use the show data style of doing it. I tend to use the show data more often than the repeating panel, but that's just, I think, coincidence. And I think that unless I'm wrong, the generating of design elements, this wizard can do the repeating panel, and I believe if you choose repeating panel and inline, it will actually generate it. We can test. Let's just check. Actually, I think if repeating panel is selected and these are all in line, it will generate them like we've done here in line. Let's just do it. I'm just going to And this wizard has changed slightly, perhaps since we last went through it, Kieran, just in terms of making it simpler, making the steps more linear and easier to go through. Whatever.
I think I've been through it once since we updated, and I realised that it's much better now. Yeah, definitely.
Great.
Yeah,
that's excellent. So let's see. Yes. So there we go. So what it's done. So I say that I'm wrong. We might want to check, or maybe I had done something wrong in my selection, because I did at one point we did have the ability, because it's done it like a show data, where you see your thing.
Which you don't want, because it's going to replicate the whole thing, isn't it?
But I think maybe maybe I just went through too quickly, because I think there was the option, but that might just be something for me to look through. So don't worry about it now. I'll have a look.
I get it. But again, in saying that, you could just move the items, couldn't you, out to the bottom?
You can, exactly, which might be why it's not there. And like I say, what you then do is you have, so like add new would be, for instance, pop up, and then update and delete would be in line. Because that is another thing you can do. Again, just getting towards like the really neat stuff is, if you want to, you can have, let's say, for instance, a delete button within the repeating panel. The delete button would then, let's say it's got a delete action. it can use as a criteria the repeating panel that it is within.
Yes.
So if I click on the delete button of any of my 50 lines, the first thing that happens is that line is selected. So it becomes, you know, the active selection in the repeating panel, and then the button is executed. So so in this case, you know, I'd have, let's say we're repeating through this from the repeating panel, you know, this is our ID.
Yeah.
This would then also be the thing that was applied. So so it can work nicely. So just to make it more compact. Basically.
Yeah, and you can present the repeating panel in different ways, can't you? Sort of top to bottom, left to right, top to bottom, and left to right, or various things.
Yeah, that's right. I tend to use top to bottom nowadays, but exactly as you say, there is vertical or horizontal and vertical. Horizontal and vertical is kind of nice for, like, if you want just multiple sort of tiles, effectively. So there are options, and indeed sort of some specific options around, like resizing and, you know, pagination, etc., next, back, etc.
Yeah. Now again, Andrew, at the moment there's a lot of interest, a lot of demand because of the interfaces like Trello for taking a record as almost like a card and dragging and dropping it to another thing. I think you've done that stuff with Overall, haven't you? Using their skills in kind of CSS and third-party tools and things. Mm-hmm. Where are we now with the sort of drag and drop aspect of these interfaces?
So there are no drag and drop elements here, but there is absolutely nothing to stop us developing some. I think we've even got some spec'd out. Right. I think that right now plugins would be our option of choice because of the flexibility and the reusability. So I think that the challenge with drag and drop is at times it's quite specific, and to actually spec a completely generic drag and drop functionality,
it's tough.
It's surprisingly tricky because there are like specifics as to how it would work.
But what about the fact that obviously if you've got a panel, which is basically a place on the, you know, it's just a panel, but if you actually wanted to have elements presented in a panel and then move them to another panel, presumably that, you know, really what you're doing is you're dragging a record from one status to another status, aren't you?
But when we say that, what we're talking about is changing a value in the database, a flag. In state progress, whatever. So that's the thing, is how do you represent that? How do you link each panel to a particular value in the database? It's doable for sure. But it is something that we would have to have to write in as a new design. There's absolutely nothing to stop us doing it. It'd be very useful. No objections at all. We just need to add it to the list and do it when the time comes. As a caveat, the fact that we can do a lot of that now with plugins probably anyway.
I think, to be honest, you know, I'd even be happy to put some money into that, because from a Newton Day perspective, we need that. You know, that's a feature that we desperately need. Mainly for the fact that users now expect it. You know, that's where we've got to now in the market with UIs. And I think,
absolutely. So keep going into
No, but that's the point. I think, you know, we need to get that feature in when we can, and I think we're not happy to pay some money to do it, because we need to, we need it.
Super, thanks. I'm sure it's not necessary. That absolutely counts as core Encanvas. You know, that just comes to development budget.
I think, to be quite honest, with drag and drop, that particular function of drag and drop, where you're going between one state and the next, you know, because obviously with Trello, typically what we get is a Kanban sort of design, which is these jobs haven't been started, these are active, and these have been done, and you want to drag from A to B, B to C. There's so many life cycles like that. Tender response management would be exactly the same. All of them, really. Even training, you know. Oops, ignore that.
Do you need to answer that?
No. No, I'll deal with it later. It's all right. It's going to come up on everything though for a second. But so I think you know, to just finish that point, the use case is almost exactly the same every time on there.
Good.
Quite
That's
nice.
good. Yeah.
and that is the most common use case for that drag and drop sort of scenario. But yeah, I think the point is that if you had that, you would use it pretty much on every application that we've got.
Yeah, it could be good. And so what we need to do is carefully spec the use case, and we can, I'm sure, put something together, because there's a similarly, a conceptually similar design element that we've had on the drawing board for a long time now, which is a specific filtering design element. So at the moment, if you want to filter, it all works nicely. You can have lots of drop downs, etc. But what would be nice is a completely generic filtering element. So you just stick one of them in, you say which columns you want to filter on, and it takes care of all the rest. So and that would include perhaps drag and drops. So you kind of maybe down the left hand side of this thing is you select, you look at countries, users, sales groups, etc. It'll then show them to you, and you can, I don't know, drag and drop whichever ones you want, or these sorts of things.
Yeah, the thing is that I think with that, it is kind of like, it reminds me, if you look at the examples like Trello, it is very much like a repeater panel, where you've got basically a sub panel within the repeater panel, which is your record. And you can click on it and you can see all the attributes and properties of that record. On the right hand side of the panel, which we can also do today. And then the only difference is you're actually moving you're dragging and dropping between the columns effectively in the repeater panel, those cards, as it were, which you've got.
Exactly right. So I think the time for us to do that is once we have version 4 up and running, we've done the look and feel, so we kind of know what we're going to want this design element to look like, or rather the appearance that we're going to want it to fit in with on many occasions.
Yeah, because I'm sure so many people are after that drag and drop functionality.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll end up with people just buying the platform
simply for that,
because they want to do no code, but they want drag and drop, and they don't know how to do it.
Absolutely.
It's one of those common things. But the fact is that even though they want drag and drop, the complexity is never just in that, is it? It's actually the logic of the applications. You and I both know, so when they say I want drag and drop, it's like, well, yeah, but now you want a conditional rules on the data.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to put mathematical calculations on the impact of that change that you've got, and all those good things, So I think the fact that we've got this whole ecosystem behind it, then you can just drag and drop. Effectively, you're then harnessing everything that's behind it that they won't have thought of, as a user, but they'll desperately need.
Absolutely right.
That's brilliant. I think, any other questions, Kieran, about repeater panels and show datas?
Actually, we didn't go through show datas, did we? Sorry, you go, Kieran?
Oh no, I was fine. I was going to show.
So panels and repeater panels. If it's all right, let's leave show datas as the first one to start with on the next session. So last week we went through the basic controls, the text, the inputs. I'd say so. Today we'll look through ones that are no less important, but just a step up in terms of complexity. I think we'll start with the show data, which I'm sure we actually all know pretty well, and similarly then the buttons. We'll just look at the main button, because functionally the image button and the text button are absolutely equivalent. They just appear differently to the user.
Yeah.
Beyond that, did we look at repeater panels last time?
Yeah.
We did. Yeah.
Yeah, we've done that one.
Yeah. We've done. Yep. We could also have a very quick look at the grid view as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Good. So just specifically the show data and the button form vast majority of the interaction functionality of very many of the pages of the average site. Sure, there's going to be clever stuff, either on the first page or kind of, here and there, but really the meat and veg, as it were, the real workhorse of just so much functionality is being able to view the data, sort the data, filter the data, but then also manipulate the data. So show data itself is about viewing the data. A second. Let's just have a so just fundamentally, in terms of the linking, we're talking about including columns. So these then are what you see when you are when you're looking at the show data. There are two more advanced options, but the base option is the include column. So I think before I just bring up the properties of that, there's actually one very simple column to cover off, which again, I'm sure you both know this very well. I'm just repeating it for completeness, is the identifying column. So what that is, and you can have multiple identifying columns per show data, but when a row is selected in the show data needs to know how to, what it's selected. So normally in almost every table, there's a unique identifier that is just unambiguous and is the safest way to do it. But it is also possible in other scenarios to, for instance, if you've got the count number, like a client account number and an order number, and that is what uniquely defines a record, well, then you could use those two as a combined pair. But as I say, even then, in a proper relation database, you would still have a row ID for whatever we're looking at there, some kind of order line or something like that. But still, the option is there. And then the key thing here is that, so let's say this is let's say we have our customers, and we could, so normally we would, the show data will be both, sort of showing, but then also selecting data from the same table. But quite often, actually, there will be a case where, in fact, we then have some other functions. So let's say, for instance, we have our orders. So we have like your ID, the customer ID, blah. So then what we can do is, if, for instance, we were to have a show data down here, which is, so this is the orders. So the orders would be coming from here. What we could do is, having got the customer ID, and in fact, so my apologies, rather than this being called row ID, I'm actually now going to call this customer ID just for the naming convention. We could actually, this show data might filter. So once you select a customer, it's going to show the orders. So then what we would do is, the customer ID is our identification here, and we would say that we want to apply the filter for the orders table there, and we can actually select which of the links, which of the identification links apply. So I can see, so here, if, just to complete the example, if, for instance, we have a text box, gone at the bottom text area, let's say we have a text box, and this text box has the name of the currently selected customer, then what we would do is we would just have the same thing where we've got, so this is a fairly obvious link, but it enables us to avoid any ambiguity, where the identifying column is the customer ID, but actually it says if you are retrieving data from the customers table, that it's going to filter on that column. But then, as we've got set up for this order show data, it is then filtering on using that same selected identification thing and filtering on the customer ID. So yeah, it all works nice and allows us to work between structures. Now, technically, any column could be used as the filter column. So, for instance, if we did have include columns to name and business, then we could select any of the source links to apply as a criteria. So the way I actually think about it is, an identification link is just basically a hidden value. So include is stuff that we want to show, but we can similarly use it in the ways that we use an identification link. The identification link is just a special one where we're not showing it, but it's there to use.
Now, Andrew, when you were showing me that, one of the things I did notice is some of the include options. I know you've got a formatted option for include. The parameters on the formatting are what? What can you do? What formatting?
So that's a massive separate question. We're going to come back to that in a moment. We're just going to look at the simpler stuff. So the include links form kind of the workings, the logic in terms of, most often it's the filtering, etc. When we come to displaying stuff, I'll get into that in a second. And this is where this one particular design element is going to suddenly, but we're going to blink and it'll be, an hour from now and we'll still be going.
Right.
So, because then the other thing is, as well as, so this identification link, most often is used to filter, but then also we can use it to store data. So let's say, we want to say, customer notes, we've got, I don't know, some sort of note ID, customer ID, note, whatever. So let's say we have another button where we're selecting a customer and we want to add a note. Yeah. So then this other button would be using the value from the show data. And what we would do, instead of filtering, what we instead want to do is we will store the selected value into customer notes. And again, exactly the same as with the filter is we can then, any of the identification or include links, we can choose to store there. And there are kind of odd cases now and again where you end up storing something other than the primary key, but most often it's that primary key identifying value. And in fact, as you can see, the default, so if this is blank, the default, because 99 times out of 100, this is what we want, is that it will choose the first of the identification links that are defined and use that. But there is the ability to specifically specify it if we want more control. And so that's the identifying links. The other thing is that, let me just quickly come on to another page and just very quickly show you one more thing, is that it kind of in the same way that with the drop down. So show datas are allowed selection, drop downs have selections, and we had this thing where we were populating the drop down with items and text from one table, but then the selection was coming from another table. It is quite common with a drop down. We can absolutely do the same thing with the show data. So we could be getting our customers from here, but then what we might do is, for instance, you might have this might be just being used for display, and actually we might then get get selection there from our notes. So an example of that would be, let's say, in fact, that this tab was saying show, was saying show me notes. So we'd coincidentally have a show data. I wasn't joking when you had 90 whatever percentage of functionality show data, but so this show data might well be looking through the notes, and it would be showing the notes, and it would have it. Then what we might have is we might, for some reason, it happens occasionally, is we might say, we might say this note is for this customer. Oh, that's capitals. This note is for this customer. So here we would want the list of customers, as I've got it. But then and it would be filtering here, because actually no, it would be filtering it would filter that. That's correct. It would be filtering, and what it would be doing is this would then be applying. Also, it would have an. This is a lovely example. Sorry, Jess, I'm just going to quickly just take a step back, because what we've got here is actually a very good example where the main things that this particular show data cares about are the notes, but actually we could include the custom ID as another hidden link, because that is what we're going to need to apply for our filter, where this show data is then getting its selection. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, correct.
It is. Having said that, I've just thought there is actually perhaps a simpler way of doing it. So the way I've just described it is potentially slightly more convoluted than maybe for a slightly more convoluted use case. So let's actually take that off, because what I would probably do, in fact, is instead actually we would just be going get selection. So in fact, the use case I've put together here is actually served this way, where this is going through the rows, and in the same way that we would have let's say we wanted a label that was getting the note for the selected thing. Similarly, if this show data is filtering here to show the customer ID, we'd actually just have get selection. And what we would do here is we would say which of the identifying links from the customers table this value was given us. So this is telling us that we're getting the customer ID and to select the rows.
Yeah, okay.
So a bit of a diversion there because this isn't used that often, but it is sometimes. And I think the main thing here is just to note that show datas can have their selection, filtered or specifically populated. So yeah, it's useful. And for instance, we'll come to it in a moment, but just to jump ahead ever so slightly, show datas can have multiple selections. So it can either be that you can only select one line, or you can potentially select multiple lines. So they just give a slightly different way of selecting multiple lines compared to, for instance, a checklist or a drop down. Well, a drop down would be one line, because of course a drop down and a checklist are just showing the name or whatever. Whereas with a show data, you can show multiple columns of data. So yeah, you can just use it for selection.
You've actually added quite a lot to this control, I noticed, because you've got a user sortable, is user filterable as well. That was never there, and also show totals row, that was never there.
So yeah, these were in version 3, but they were in the late part of version 3. And as you say, I think that certainly, more recently than when we've gone through it in detail. Yeah. And these are actually, we'll come back to these in a moment, but at the same time, they are the things that do provide a huge amount of value to having the show data as a single element you can just bung in. Because actually, having said, I'll come back to them. We're talking about them, so I'll just continue. So running through these general options, and we have I'll turn them all off, and as we're going through, I will talk to you about each one. Yeah. So read only is useful when we want to use it merely to display the table. It happens sometimes. We're not interested in selecting, we're just reporting data. Great. So read only is a thing. So then multiple selections, as I mentioned, this is the option between, do we want just, when you select a row, it merely selects, it selects just that row and unselects everything else, or do we want to allow it to use, for instance, control select, or you can select a row and hold on shift and select, and it'll select everything between the original selection and where you've selected. So it's a nice way of doing it. And then you get two options in terms of appearance. Do you want to have little check boxes down the left-hand side, which shows your selection? I think that's perhaps the older way of doing it, and it just looks messy nowadays. So we tend to just use a flat list where you just get your highlighted rows. And one thing to note is that we can have a read-only show data that is showing selection. So read-only selects whether or not the user can interact with it, but we might still have, for instance, this scenario where we are highlighting the customer according to the selection, but we might not want them to change it. With this particular scenario, I'm just thinking about this notes. It's a very bad example I've come up with. So don't worry too much about this precise way of using it. It was more just showing the fact that the selection of the show data can be populated from the data source. So we then have the option to show the title row. That is most often we do, but sometimes if it's just a simple one, we hide that. But then with the title row, we get the option to make to give the ability for the user to sort the show data, then also filter the show data. And these are very important and very powerful when it comes to instantly being able to access the data. And it's a bit like the auto filters in a spreadsheet. It's one of the things that makes spreadsheets so useful is that ability to filter and sort the data. So to have that
these are all kind of spreadsheet type features, aren't they?
Exactly right. I think that the show data can be looked at as a display only spreadsheet in some ways. Then we have totals row is very useful. So you can position at the top or at the bottom, and we can look at that in a moment. But yeah, that is indeed very useful. And then there's the option for the totals row to be expanded or collapsed by default. So it can, because you can show like a spreadsheet, you can show like the sum, the average, the maximum, the minimum, etc. And you can either have that expanded, or you can have it just showing the total, for instance, and then you click on it to expand. Then limit the number of rows shown is a very useful thing to just to prevent accidentally displaying a million lines of data to the user and crashing their browser. This is kind of a hard limit for the show data. More often what I do is from the show data, so this show data obviously is getting its data from customers. There's the modify query link, and this goes to the table. And this just allows us to control kind of the meta circumstances of populating the data. For instance, only showing the unique values. So that's very useful. And being able to, if you have the surname or the name, sorry, Andrew appears 5 times, but you only want to be able to select one Andrew, then you can just do that. But then similarly, you can select the maximum number of rows. The usefulness of being able to have it in a link is because links can be conditional, as we've seen in the past. So I could, for instance, have a thing here, a checkbox or drop down that says, limit to 100 rows, and I could uncheck it. It would then, this link would be depending upon that checkbox, would then drop off. And if the user was sure about it, they could then display everything, this sort of stuff. So those are just the general options. Render type is very unimportant. It can be left on asynchronous basically the entire time. All that is the show data is normally displaying data, and often it's the main contents of the page, and it can be quite a lot. Sometimes you'll be getting up to easily 1,000 rows with sort of multiple columns. So what this allows us to do is, by default, with the asynchronous render, what it will do is it will send the page to the browser for the user. That will render, and then there'll be a separate query where the show data will, independently of everything else, go off to the server and get its data and then display it. Now, the good thing about that is that the user isn't just seeing a blank page with a spinning wheel while the show data is getting its large data set. So it's very nice. It feels much more responsive. It's a much more modern way to do it. Yeah. However, now technically there are fringe cases where we might want to have the show data's data being sent along with it in the main page population. Right. For instance, just occasionally there'll be cases where you've got a very small show data with, 10, 20 options, maybe filtering or something like that. And if it is populated asynchronously, then if that show data, and this is just one example, you don't have to, again, be too worried about the specifics, but if that show data is in like a filter pane, maybe that's, let's say, down the right-hand side of the screen, and there are other things beneath it, and those things are set to kind of, relocate according to how many rows there are in this show data that has the filter, then if it's rendering asynchronously, sometimes the user will see like nothing there, and then suddenly it'll get the 20 lines, they'll arrive at the page, and everything will kind of jump down 20, whatever lines, which is not a problem. I've lost track of how many times on a website I go to click something, and as I'm clicking it, I get like a GDPR or cookies notice or something pop up, moves the entire page down, and I end up clicking in the wrong place. Drives me insane. Yeah, so kind of for that reason, you can choose to send it direct, so it'll already be there. We won't get this jump because the moment the page is rendered for the user, there will already be the 20 lines. So it's, as I say, just a very small thing, and to about even half the timeline. That's asynchronous.
Wait, Andrew, in terms of the asynchronous, then when would you kind of think you definitely need to not use asynchronous? I mean, what does
just like that? Just if, especially if you have like 5 or 10 show datas on a page that are being used to filter, for instance,
it can get just a bit like the user just sort of gets a slight shock as as kind of things jump around as all of those show datas populate.
Forming out.
So so you could just put them all in line, and then the page will arrive, boom, and they're all already there. Nothing's jumping around. But certainly for the main show data, I would always have it asynchronous. There are no advantages to not having it asynchronous.
Okay, great to know. Great to know. I'm really impressed with those enhancements, by the way. Just makes a massive difference in terms of usability.
It does, and value. Exactly right. It's that thing about just the show data is the easiest thing to stick in, and even easier if you've generated it using the wizard, and then but instantly you've got such power. So it's about reusing that power, and it's what makes Encanvas and things like this such a great platform. So just another couple of options here and this is around the selection. So mentioned that the show data is sometimes used to display data, but often is used to allow users to make selections. So this option here, the when contents change, this allows us to specify the default selection behavior. So let's say we've just arrived at the page. This if no selection is actually the first thing that happens. So what happens when we first arrive at the page, or indeed when the data in the show data is refreshed, so it repopulates? Select nothing, select first row, select first row if anyone exists, or select all. So obviously these are just slightly different user interface experiences. Sometimes I'll put select the first row, just because it can feel nicer. But then again, often also I leave it on select nothing. So just anything. Let's restore previous selection. That is again a more technical option. It's been a very, very, very long time since I last had to change this, because what this is let's say I have this show data which shown in the notes, and I've got note number 10 selected. And now let's say I edit the note and I hit a button that says refresh note, or update rather. That is then going to cause the show data to refresh. I'll just draw it for the sake of argument. It'll have an update. It will be using this, and it will be refreshing the show data because we want the show data to refresh. So this refresh, this is where this option comes in, because as I mentioned, that is then causing the show data to pull back its data from the data source. And almost every single time we use a show data, we want it to restore the selection. So we want it to say, okay, my data's changed, that's fine. I had note 10 selected. I still want note 10 selected. Technically, there are really weird, unusual cases. Often, or not often, but sometimes when the show data is invisible and is being used for some kind of processing or logic behind the scenes, sometimes you want this to kind of go back to blank, or indeed maybe select all. That's a thing, is if you have a hidden show data where in fact you are using it to somehow capture all of the rows related to something, then when something changes, you don't want the previous selection to affect it. You do want it to now dump its selection and start again with everything selected. So you do this, but as I say, the vast majority of the time in the data use the show data, you just you want it to persist its selection. Good. So there's the option there. So then now to come back to here into your, and in fact let me just clear the links, because to come back to your very good question is when we are looking at the column, we have 3 different options for how we present that column to the user. It's kind of like the way that with the label, we have get data and we have use text. Get data is the one we use vast majority of the time, and we just don't need extra complexity, extra settings of the use text. Same thing here. So include column is the one I tend to use more often than not, because the include link still has a great degree of flexibility. So you can align the column heading. You can align the column itself. You can align the heading. You can control whether it is sortable and filterable, etc. Sometimes you don't want to allow this. For instance, certain data types, etc., in the database aren't happy being filtered or things like that. So those are there. Then in the totals, so if using that previous option we saw where you can show or hide the totals, you can control whether or not it appears in the total row, because of course it makes no sense to have the name in a total row, or unless you have, for instance, the number of names which are blank, for instance. So you can control it. So if you select figures, as you can see, you can control what meaningful ones are relevant for each column. And as I say, you could, for instance, show the number of blank names. And again, this then is when it's collapsed, you can specify the default effective to show. And we could, for instance, show the blank count, which is actually very useful in terms of auditing data completeness, etc.
And just another point, show when collapsed. I mean, I understand what you mean by show when collapsed, as in the actual data's gone and you've just got the total.
Yeah.
Is that right?
No, almost. I think maybe we need to put up an example so I can show you.
I was going to say, so my point would be, how would you collapse a cable? Okay.
Yeah, let me show you then. I'm just thinking which one to.
Before we jump into that, there's one other item on there that I noticed that I didn't see before, which was a header row summary kind of thing. So I assume what you've done there when you looked at those include options on the link is you can now actually include a header kind of row summary on top of the header rows. Is that right? A grouping.
Well, this is kind of the turtle. Let's have a look at. I tell you what. I just need to very quickly then update we'll use the sandbox site. I just very quickly need to update it to the version that I built this morning.
Is this time for a tea break then?
Exactly what I was going to suggest. So are you able to pause recording? Is that possible?
I honestly, I don't know.
Or do we just stop or do we just pause the thing and
I think if I stop it, I can just
start it. Yeah, go.
No. Actually, no, you're in control of it at the moment because obviously you're the host.
I can pause recording. There we go. Right. Okay, good stuff. So what I've done is I'm just basically wrecking your sandbox. My apologies, Kieran. But just wrong screen. Here we go. So I've just onto sandbox to put just a little show data here. Now I think that actually has it. No, that's not right. I think that, let me say, because it's what I'm just going to do. Sorry, yeah, it's not going to look as pretty. Things just quickly screen. I will just take out the styling, because that was just messing us up. Getting that for demo. So we should now just get just our show data. Yeah, not terribly exciting. Where has I must have done something odd in the styling, which I should be getting a scroll bar. What have I done there? No reason at all for there not to be a scroll bar there, except that I've just done some odd styling. Well, so we won't worry about it now. Rest assured, that is just I've done something weird and custom for the login screen that we normally see. So just ignore it and close your eyes really hard and pretend you see a scroll bar. Anyway, so show data. So this is just in the database of the sandbox. This is some random clients. So let's now. So we've included the client name, and let's also, for instance, let's include the. Let's also. Sorry. Oh, my mouse. Sorry. Let's also include the account name. So let's go that. Nothing unexpected. As I say, with the options, what we can do is we can, for instance, put the head alignment left, etc., etc., etc. So let's now review that. Good. So what you mentioned before, we looked at this ability to filter and sort. So you can sort, for instance, descending, sort ascending. We could sometimes, so here, these are just all of the options that there are with something like this, with a client name, or with a kind of course, it makes no sense at all to have them in here because each one only appears once. And I'll show you in a moment how we can turn that off. Actually, let's do that now. So in the client name, that's this option here. So we can turn off specific values.
Yeah.
I'll just do for client name. So now when we look at it, we'll get much more what we expect in that the client name, you can ascend, descend, and you instantly seeing your custom filters, because that's the other option, is you can allow whether or not to custom filter or allow custom filters.
So all the time, I mean, obviously in the previous, when we built a canvas previously, you used to have to create all the filtering above the show data effectively,
exactly.
didn't you? And now you're not doing any of that really. You're doing it all within
exactly.
the show.
All hidden and automatic. Exactly right. And completely customized. Off these stupid screen sharing controls go away.
That's super different, Andrew, to how it was.
It is. But and as in the nice thing is, is not is equal to begin is like 21. Let's apply that. So there we go. There are all the 21s. And then let's now add another. So and is not blank. Obviously that's a, but yeah, is blank is not blank is a very useful one. But so let's just say is not like, so let's just say it doesn't have 9 in it, for instance. There we go. And then we can sort it, and we can so do all of these things. And then let's, for instance, put in the sales group. So in our clients, we have sales group 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So I'm guessing we have sales groups. We'll just generate. So this is our integer ID. We'll just do our generate.
Where does this data come from, by the way?
This is just in the sandbox thing. So I think it's some extremely random data we made up for demo.
A long time ago. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So we've got our sales group. So it's matching sales group to the sales group, and we are returning the name. So let's just now include our sales group. We'll just call it sales group. So left and left. Obviously upload and remap the data. So we'll now get the sales group. This now, the sales group, is where these specific ones do come in useful. So as you can see, you've got 503 group A, 497
okay,
group.
So you're connecting via you're doing that filter via the second table, basically.
Exactly. So it's filtering on what it's showing. So yep, it's really good in that sense.
That's really clever. I guess there's an obvious question that says you're getting to the stage now with your show data development that you've done, where it is taking on many more of the attributes of a spreadsheet, basically.
That's correct. Yep,
but on that question, therefore, I mean, typically in a spreadsheet, there are two forms of, calculation relationship. One is the stuff that you do on the fly, and the other is when it's basically showing calculations between columns to produce a final column. So, for example, like an expense form. Well, in our situation, are we, where are we with that? If you are using it to make calculations across columns, are you able to enforce those rules in now with what you've got?
Yes, we are. So there are 2 ways of doing that. The one is in the data source. So for instance, if you're using SQL, you can always add column A to column B, and that's your result. But I'll show you in a moment how we could actually do it with plugins. So okay. We'll get to that in a moment. But but this is useful. So the filters, and then so for instance, here's all our group A, and as I say, there are obviously many more rows kind of scrolling off the bottom, and then but we can still add our custom or etc. So yeah, it's all nice.
Wow,
so
that's really impressive.
It's useful, isn't it? So we were looking at the totals row. So let's include a totals row. Let's stick it at the top because I'm having scrolling issues. And let's just expand it by default. So so right now there's nothing that'll be in the totals row because we haven't ticked that checklist. It's just blank. But normally, let's for instance include our sales in there. Now, option we will put figures into the total row. I'll just leave everything there for now, and let's have a look at how that looks. So as you can see, we now have for the sales a total average. It would be nice to add some formatting into this at some stage, but that's just something for another day. But as you can see, there are all our things. If we can click, this is the expand collapse. So it can sometimes be useful just to have it small and then collapsing to show all the details. Figures. And normally it actually makes more sense to have it at the bottom because you kind of, you get the line and the total, but just as a, But then the nice thing, of course, is so this is, these are all our things. If we now filter group A, it's now instantly updated, for just group A. So you've got your your total, your average, etc. So very useful like that.
Yeah, I'm gobsmacked, Andrew. How different.
Yeah, it makes it very, very useful for understanding the data, and as you say, based on spreadsheet functionality.
Yeah.
Good. So that's great. So let's go back then to our. Were there any other things here?
Yeah, I just wanted to look at the grouping of the headings that you.
Well done. You're a sentence ahead of me. That is excellent. Just quickly before we do that, yes, let me quickly show you these multiple selections. So this would be if we were using this to filter something else. Then what I can do, so I'm not holding anything down, it's just doing a single select. But if I hold down Control, I can select multiple rows. And as I mentioned, if I hold down Shift instead, I can select things and then hold down Control to. So you can then generate your nice multiple selections, and then you can then obviously use that to filter other elements like normal. If let's just put checklist just to show you the option of screen sharing.
Well, the other thing I was thinking about, Andrew, is that let's say you're looking at customer accounts, you want to select a series of records, you can actually select the records and then save a new list effectively.
Exactly right.
And then just have a table that says lists, and
that's
you just
exactly right. You're absolutely right. There are multiple uses. Absolutely right. And you see, so this is what you get if you have the checklist. I personally don't like this as much, although it's kind of a different dynamic because it becomes a toggle. So I'm not holding down Control. Because it is a check effectively. So on the flat list, it would be selecting one row each time I clicked, whereas here it is.
Again, it's horses for courses, isn't it? Because you'll get occasions where, if you're looking for, selecting, as you say, customers in a list, that would get tedious. But if it was actually selecting industry sectors, it might feel a bit more appropriate to actually select like that.
Exactly right. Yep, absolutely. So that's just distracting. I'll take off the total rows off for now. And so you can actually switch off the filtering and the sorting as well. Sometimes you do that. It doesn't really matter. The screen sharing thing. Go away. Cool. So exactly as you say, let's go back to our example, and let's say we want the name and the account number to be effectively a grouping. So what we would then do is we would just give it a header group. So so let's say it's on details. And then what it will do is it will group together all the ones that are in the same header group. So if we now look at it, as you can see, you now get details. So we can, what we can do is often we will do, we'll actually want to do a bit more formatting, because just this particular template for this sandbox has no grid lines. As you can see, it's nice and it's straight, etc. But it does mean then that the grouping is slightly unclear, because sometimes we have an appearance where it has grid lines, and then it would be obvious. So what we can do is, instead of an include link, we can add in, and I could either just directly add it in, so for here formatted, but you can also always convert a link if you want to good formatted. So that's now a formatted link. So it's as if initially I just did formatted.
Okay.
So what we can do here then is we can now, this is the use text equivalent from the label. And you can put in like prefixes, suffixes. You can specify a particular format. So you can, again, let's you can make it 2 decimal places. Obviously, that isn't a numeric format. But also you can specify a background color. So for instance, if we just made this a gray, and actually I might do the same here. And as you can see, when you convert between different objects, it will transfer as many as possible common things, such as the title, the header group, etc. But let's give this the same background color. I've probably chosen it. It's probably too dark. But now if we view it, as you can see, you kind of get that is actually way too dark. But you can see what I'm doing there in terms of breaking.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. So you can effectively break up the colours or the textures,
absolutely,
even if you haven't got a style sheet that's allowing you to do it.
Exactly. Because what I would normally do is I would normally, so this would be left aligned. So what I would normally do is both of these would be sorry, left. And then the totals I would have right. So because it's a number, and then sales group, you could maybe, for instance, put center, and it just very quickly, because of just contextualizing about what the data is, it very quickly sort of becomes neat.
Yes.
I see that again, just gone off the screen. Yeah, fine. So something else we can do is so we can. There's another option, which is a traffic light. So this was a specific one where, let's say we have, what's a good example? Well, a status.
We have that requirement now, don't we, with the value chain mapping example?
Exactly.
It's likely that they're going to want to have a report on traffic light status of
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly it. So you've got many of the same element settings as with the other links. Of course, you can't put it in the totals row because it's a traffic light. But what we could do, let's say this is an alert, and let's say, for instance, that so here are the states. So this is going to take the values from here, and according to the state, as you see, it's actually quite comprehensive, including advanced web options. It's going to present sort of a flag or something. So the comparison can be, proper logic, equal all of the calculations, and then including ands and ors, etc. So let's, for instance, say if it's in sales group 1, and obviously that's just the value in the sales group. So if it's in sales group 1, then we would, you could, for instance, you could put in an image like you normally would. Right. In this case, I'll just, because I've come up.
All right, so even though it's not a repeater panel, you can now put effectively an image for this.
Exactly right. Although it's not an image from the data source, it's an image that you would specify, like an alert icon or something.
No, I understand that, but that would be the same with the repeater panel, wouldn't it? You'd have to create an image. Yeah,
exactly right. Yeah. And then what you can do also is you can change the color of this cell. So for instance, if the default display is plain text, it will show the it's almost multiple things. I realize it now, because what I could do, actually, let me just, for the sake of argument, so by default there's nothing, but if it's equal to 1, let's just put an image in. Let's find myself an image. I bet in a second. Let's find an image. There will be one.
Your science project's going to look pretty damn cool, isn't it, Kieran? Oh, you're on mute, mate. Just realised.
Yeah, sorry about that background noise. Yeah, it's going to be really good, actually. Yeah, it's going to look really, really cool. Definitely learned a lot from this. Glad it's been recorded and I can kind of go back and have a look at all of these little details. Yeah.
The recording is definitely helping. Like, I'm even aware as I'm speaking, I'm just like, oh, I can go full speed. You know, they can always just go back and check it again. I don't need to worry that anything makes sense or is coherent. You can just like replay it one sentence at a time to try and extract the weird train of thought that's going on. But anyway, okay, so if the value is 1, it's going to put, this is just a little star from that icon set that you sent across in.
Yeah.
So let's, and we'll just call this, you know, like, I call it alert. Right. So let's publish it. Now, okay, so as you can see, we'll sort out alignments in a second, but as you can see, it's done basically what we want. You know, it's the A's have the star. So what we could always do, and let's just we'll probably center it. So what we so there you go. So if we wanted to, we could of course put a different thing for B or something for C, or you know, if this was like a 1 to 10, you can have 1, you know, 1 to greater than 1, less than 3 is red, greater than 3 is orange. A lot of flexibility here, obviously. But then the other thing you can do, so this is when there's an image, but you can do another thing, and let's just a quick look at the industry. Okay, so industry is just a 1 to 3 value. I said, pretend it's something, pretend it's actually something meaningful. Let's add another traffic light column, but here, instead of by default, let's actually just show the value. So plain text. And we'll call this, I don't know, let's call this, I don't know, priority or something, 1 to 3. Okay. And because this doesn't have to be a numeric value, you know, it could be anything. So priority, for instance, let's just stick it center for argument's sake, and publish it. Then as you can see, it's now just showing us, that's, you know, it's like a normal column. But the thing is that now you can highlight it. So this is where we can add the same states. And so let's, for instance, say, you know, number 1, for instance, we could stick an image instead of the text, but let's keep it text, but let's make it red. So this is now going to highlight all the red ones. They get red, red, etc. As you see, and nice stuff. And I think I mentioned that it's useful for sort of slightly more advanced webby stuff. You can just do really custom stuff if you want to make it cool. Another thing, for instance, you can do is you can always change the back color as well. Let's make it let's make the color, let's make it white on pink, for instance. Oh, sorry, I didn't close the browser. There we go. You see, reflagged it. And then, of course, if we wanted to, each state, there is the default state. So we could, for instance, have, this is going to be so ugly, my apologies, but we could have like green as the, as the default. Actually, I tell you, let's make it white on green. There you go. So as you can see, pretend I spent a moment on that and actually chose.
Yeah, congratulations! It is.
I've broken the internet. It's so.
Yeah. I've got designers on the phone wanting to talk to you.
I can hear a cruise missiles incoming.
Yeah. Good. It's good.
But as you can see, it's a hugely useful feature.
Yeah, and it's just showing how seismically different the show data has become to what it was to begin with, which was basically literally just showing data, and now it's bringing in user controls, it's bringing in richness of visualization. It was really only possible with a repeater panel.
Exactly right.
You actually get to the stage where you kind of think, well, apart from the drag and drop stuff, which is obviously going to come up in the future, why would I need anything else but this, almost, with the flexibility I've got on it?
You are absolutely right. There are an increasing number of canvases which are just, for me, a full screen show data. Because in a moment I'm going to show you some stuff which is may blow your mind even further. Because so obviously this traffic light comment is very useful. The other thing we can do is we could customize the entire row. So similar concept to that column had the customization. We can set it. So let's say, for instance, for when the industry is equal to 1, we can set the entire row to be. Let's make it. Well, we're going full on nasty. Let's go for orange. This again serves to really increasingly highlight things.
I was very quiet, but I missed the link to how you got to customizing the row. Sorry, just
100%. Yep. So let me under absolutely right. So that is the. I'll take out this traffic light.
Yeah.
So it's just a different link type. It's row appearance customization.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So it allows us to do similar things that we just did with that column, but with the row. And a thing here is that the column doesn't have to appear in the results.
Right.
So for instance, that traffic light, obviously we were literally saying include this column, but we wanted it as a traffic light. But actually we could customize it. Let's say again, this is a status. So in this, we can get same thing. We can see, let's just say equals to 1. We'll stick it in a nasty orange. Then they'll nowhere in the show data will that appear. However, our rows are actually highlighted accordingly.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay. So again, useful.
Yeah, really powerful.
Yeah, it is nice stuff. So what else can you do with the show data? Actually, I think that's pretty much. So you can sorting by again is a fairly common one. You can sort by ascending, descending. In the but actually that's kind of used for the default, because now you can always sort using the column headings.
So I guess my question that we didn't quite answer was, if I had column A was 1 to 3 and column B was 4 to 6, how would I add a total of A plus?
We haven't got to that yet. So we'll come back to that in a moment.
Okay.
So if that's up. So
that's all right. Yeah.
Because no, we'll do it now since it's come up, because otherwise we're going to be thinking about it until we get there. So and this is with population. So version 4, the really, really, really super awesome, nice thing. Let me just remind myself of our state. So let's say, so account number, for instance, ACC 125.
Yeah.
Okay. With version 4, we can, let's take this column, the properties, we can perform input and output processing on any column as the data is coming out from the database, going into, coming out. And this is suddenly pretty mind-blowing. So we can do all sorts of things. So let's, for instance, what it is, we know that this is text, so I'll say it's text so that it gives me the correct options, because as you can see, I now have additional processing because it knows it's text. Let's, for instance, just add a prefix. Let's just say double or hello, underscore, for instance.
Yeah.
So as you can see, that's on the data source main prefix. So if I now populate it, then we're getting, there we go. Yay! I mean, obviously that's terrifying, but it gives us complete, slightly terrifying flexibility, because I've done the simplest possible thing. Let's get rid of that. Let's instead custom code method. I can now do anything a computer can do to that value.
Right.
In goes my code and it'll run, which is as I said, this is where it just suddenly starts to get ridiculous. But and the other, because what we can, so there's full logic. You can do all sorts of clever things. You can you can do you can add in, for instance, like if we had a let's for instance just make a nonsense thing where we've got a numeric box where you're going to type in a number and you want it added. So you can, for instance, let's say if this was maybe a number, you could for instance do some basically, let's do custom code. We can pull in another parameter which would be the so my value, and let's say we have value to add, and we'll just say do I can well, not, but this is a level of complexity I think one would not need to get to in the vast majority of cases, but it's just to show you. Oh wait a second, this is gonna fully crash. There we go. Oh yeah, that's true. So I can make those both integers by default. There we to make classes. It shouldn't do. Oh, I'll fix this. But basically,
it says it's all right now.
Yeah, but it sort of does. It sort of doesn't. I think that I must be changing something. But what it will allow us to do is the parameters we can put in, for instance, any like a numeric box value, etc., directly into this logic, and then this logic is what's directly going into the show data. So we've suddenly opened up a whole new avenue where stuff can interact with other stuff. Because of course this this could be it could be invisible. So let's say we've got the user prefers a certain numeric formatting or currency. You could get that from the database which is attached to their user record. Then according to that thing, it could be, because as I mentioned, everything can be conditional. So let's do logic. So if it can be if equality. So if, for instance, a design element, pick our design element. Oh, this is so satisfying. So if this numeric box, oh sorry, I clicked twice there. If this numeric box, for instance, is greater than 10, then I want to add a prefix of something to the value, just anything any of this logic. So the show data and each column, or indeed any design element, any data that's coming to or going back into, crucially as well, the database, becomes infinitely customizable. So we can really mess with things. Then to answer your specific question, Ian, so the data is coming from, so this is the columns, and as I say, we can mess with a particular column. I'm going to clear that because I've totally destroyed it. What we can actually do is we can do processing on the table level itself. So this is each column kind of in isolation.
Okay.
But here, this is where we actually have a complete, the table itself. So just as an example, let's say we wanted to add a row. So let's add it at the start. So column number 1, let's add hi there, just as an example. So that is now going to add a row to our results. So if there we go. So there's our hi there. So as you can see, that again is very meaningful, because in the past we would have needed to go into the data source and be doing strange things, which you really don't want to do. But what you can do there, and we'll probably expand this as ever. That this is going to increase the options. For now, to do what you wanted to do, and what we could do is we could do just a custom code method, and this gets passed. This comes in as a table. So for instance, for me, I can now do any weird manipulation I want to do between the columns of the table that's being pulled in. Ultimately, we will probably include an additional thing here where we would be able to do operations based upon indeed. So you can choose a column. I can choose a second column, and I could for instance, then I could then do any. So what we just do is how do we do it? I'll figure it out eventually, but maybe it's a side chain. So we can just take that column value and we can apply all the sorts of normal things to it, and then what we would do is we would include we would include basically another column value here, because at the moment we can
Got it.
either bring in a giant value of this. So we'll add that in. Not hard. It's just some on the list of things to do.
Yeah. So effectively, you could create a new column on the table, and another column on the table, and then having created a new column on the table, you can then act on one or more of the existing columns in some logic that you want to create that actually comes up with that outcome.
Yes. So that's absolutely right. So for the moment, but what we would have to do is, for the moment, the show data needs a column here to point at.
Yes.
So what you would do is you would just add a new, like just add a predefined value, call it, my new column, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And that's actually all you need to do, because, as you said, and you can then do your processing, and you can always start off with a value or leave it blank. But that's the thing. So you would still add the column here, because you then need to point to it, rather than specifically adding a column here in the processing on the table. But that's just really a UI thing.
Yeah, got it. Because you're not actually, wouldn't have anywhere to put it. The data.
Exactly right. Yeah, you couldn't access it, because the other, if we added some kind of extra thing here, which would be like additional columns, we could do that. We may do that at some point. However, we're not doing that just yet. So at the moment, you kind of basically create the new column here.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, same thing. Yeah.
I get that. So you can add a predefined value, and then you could set rules on that population.
Yeah, exactly, and process it. Yeah, exactly. And it may well be that this predefined value is just blank. It's just your starting point. It involves no extra work for the data source. It's just Good.
Okay. Yeah.
So that enables, that really is almost the last sort of building block in the magnificent structure.
That is rather mind blowing, actually. That last bit.
it really is, and as I say, especially because anything taking its data from the data, so you can now do this. The label is a slightly unusual one, because it has an extra option. So the label has the option in the get. The label can actually define its own logic within the link, and that's just because of how labels are used sort of in other ways more commonly. But for most things, it's based upon the column, because of course you can always have multiple multiple instances of the same column if you need different logic.
Yeah. Okay.
So not anything there. Very good. Let me just delete this, because who knows what I've done. It's just
there was one thing that we didn't look at, which as a feature, which is to store the contents as a table in the actual selections.
There are many things we've not yet got to.
I just spotted that one on the actual list, though. From the
way through that. Yeah, absolutely. So let's just okay. Well, let's just see. Have we destroyed it? Let's just see. I don't think so. No, it's all still ugly. Good. Great. Okay. We can get to that next. So what that is, as you mentioned, you can store the selection from show data, but the other thing you can do is you can actually store as a variety of different formats. I think it's maybe CSV format. You can store what is appearing directly in a column. So this is.
So that's a concatenated value for the whole table.
Of everything. Correct. It's not a particularly common use case or scenario, which we don't come across it that often.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's around things like uploads, or when somebody who is really focused on doing crazy stuff with what's exactly. So they may be doing something really weird and custom in JavaScript using a plugin, and they just want to be able to store and pull things back from show data.
I get one of the options there, Andrew, though. If you've got all of the table data stored into a column, you could then run a search on that data to find anything that was in that column, like the name of a person for data privacy, for example.
Yes, potentially. That is a good point. There are a couple of things it can be used for.
No, just so we understand what it's for. That's great. That's I think that's as much as we need.
Absolutely, super.
Good to know.
So we're getting close to the end of the show date, and I don't even think we'll get to buttons today because I see it's already.
I mean, it's bizarre. I mean, but again, this is not our fault. It's your fault. You've added so much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yes.
We had. I don't think, Kieran, we had any idea what you could do.
No, I didn't know it could do even a fraction of all that. That was way more in depth than I realised.
Mind blowing.
Excellent. Well, let me show you another thing. One of my favourite things as well. So this again is another. So let's for instance stick in a panel where let's just add in a few details. What we've got, name, basically just the normal ones. Name. We're sticking a button to. I'm obviously not. This is not going to look good. Let's. I don't know. Name. What else have we got? We've got the industry. Normal drop down. You see, it's always the drop down that I lose. We will sort the drop down. Okay, so let's just industries. Yeah, here we go. So values, texts, sort by selected value, filter. Obviously, no, it's not filter items. Filter selection. This text box filters as well. That's going to get the name, store the name. Oh, I've missed out one on the here as well. So get selected entry value, then also store it. This button had a. Did I stick in? Okay, let's stick in an update. Fine. This is going to then this is our criteria. It's going to use this. It's going to use this. So actually, I tell it I'm going to just put it at the top because of whatever weird scrolling thing I've done. So this is the sort of thing we are.
We've got an error coming up on the show data there. Is there another link?
My bear me a second. Let's have a look. Oh yes, thank you. Well spotted. So it has no filter links. So absolutely right. So this is row ID is our identification.
Yeah. And
it's gone away. So even though technically I normally for neatness do actually specifically do what we were talking about earlier in terms of actually telling where to apply the filter. But as you're saying, by default, first of all, the default is it will use the first name, but also if there is no specific filter link, it will by default just use the identification link that you've defined. Yeah. So it's not necessary, but well spotted. So let's that. Oops, sorry. I see. Where's that? So why is that? I've definitely done something strange to the I don't fixed. Oh, that's what it is. So this is. I'll have to take you through these positioning presets at some point soon. Yeah. Because that's a very useful example, and that. Oh, there we go. So now we actually have our scrollable show data. Okay, cool. I must, as I say, I must show you that because it's useful. So, cancel. You know what?
That was a bit of a mess, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's this. So I must show you this. The timing will just make it all fixed. Sorry. I was working on another site and I changed my default. There we go. So not particularly exciting or impressive. So, but what we can do, okay, now we can
it makes more sense the other way around, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, not standing on a head to view it. Yeah, it's what we're used to. And I'm not bothering with the width.
Yeah.
What we can do is from the show data. This is neat. Selection detail expansion is the link I want you to add. Mm-hmm. That now hides that panel, and instead, I have to take off multiple. It only works when there is a single selection.
Selection, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can tell what it's going to do now. I've kind of spoiled the surprise. It will.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you can basically edit in place.
Wow.
Update, delete, etc. Yeah. Normally looks prettier than this.
That is amazing.
It's really useful because this panel or it can be anything. And I've got like sometimes there's a show data within a show data within a show data within a with a it can be very complex. And so this can be functionality, but it is now appearing within the selected
without mentioning any particular names while we're recording. Has this been seen by clients and well received?
Yes, it has snuck its way into certain projects where it has been, but I haven't at any stage made a big thing of it. And I'd say it hasn't yet had widespread exposure.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
But it is a useful thing. As I say, my apologies.
It's stunning. It's stunning. I mean, I'm just thrilled about that feature. That is amazing because. We talked about drag and drop, Andrew, as a functional expectation.
Yeah.
Most sites do not have this.
This is so easy.
Yeah, it makes it so easy to edit a table, particularly with drop downs. So it really gives you a UX designer a real creative advantage.
Exactly, and you just expand caps. And of course, now that we've got the our fun thing with the with the pop-ups, this is going to look ugly, but just to picture it looking, I mean, it will only take a couple of seconds to sort it out. We can now so neatly have an add new, but actually sometimes there'll be a title, that says client, and I'll have just add new in there. It's not always, not always here, but then same thing. So if this pops up our add new, I can't even remember which one this one wasn't it. It now becomes really like sorry, close. It now becomes go away screen sharing. It now becomes really neat. So that to edit or add new to add a new one.
Yeah.
It becomes and this really does then go towards that single page for your entire for everything, because it all so on. Let's just say so total sales is less than 500,000.
Wow. I mean, it's it really is impressive. I mean, to show all of that in an hour and a half or whatever that we've covered is incredible.
Exactly, and it becomes so. Oh gosh, Group A definitely has bad sales. This was the stuff. Oh, you know what? We generated this data using the sample data generator, which is a little tool I love, because you so quickly get meaningful, like random data, but that makes anything look good.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's
fantastic. So let's just see. So as we're wrapping up here, let's just see. So we've gone through the settings, we've gone through the links. Let's just see if there are any other. No, those are pretty much the standard things. I think we're now pretty much there with the show data.
I think we're about bored now, Kieran, aren't we? Is that all it does?
Exactly. Yeah. All that power, and I still managed to make it look this just dog ugly, but still. But anyway, yes.
All right, so, Andrew, listen, that's great. Thank you for that. If you could just turn the recording off now, that would be good.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, well, I'll just do. The only other thing to do is I was going to say just quickly that, because I haven't mentioned, is you probably, but I'm sure you know that the order that the include column links appear in, that's the order that in which they are. So if I was just, for instance, going to put the traffic light, let's just move it up to the top, for instance, and it will then appear on the left-hand side. Yeah, just as an example.
Understood. Which is again great for the example, Kieran, that we're working on.
Yeah, definitely.